27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16. Why am I doing this? 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ready or not, here I come. It is day 3 of our summit, the Institute for Anatomical Research Anatomy Summit. And we have been having such a great time. We've had 10 sessions already over the past 2 days and talked to some amazing people, gotten all kinds of fun insights. And we have more. We have a whole additional day here with, you can see this, no, it's over here. We have a whole list of folks coming who will share their own remarkable insights with us. And I just have a couple things to mention as we go forward with this. One, the chat is disabled. Sorry, folks, the chat doesn't work for this particular thing, nor hand raising, but we do have a Q&A zone down at the bottom of your screen that you can click on and put questions and answers in. I will not be moderating those. We have Kelly and Jim and Madhav in the background here, and they will handle that so that I can focus all of my attention on our amazing guests. The first pair of which we are honored to host in the moment will be Ann Teachworth and Allie Wesley, who are a dynamic duo who grace our lab on the regular and my home on the regular, thankfully, when they come out for dinner when they're visiting. And what great human beings. My goodness. I am so excited to talk to my friends Allie and Ann with you all to learn more about embodiment and how they approach that with their extremely deep knowledge base and experience in that. So with no further ado, I'd like to invite Ann and Allie into the session. Jim can highlight you so I can see you big. There you go. There's Allie. Hi, Allie. Allie Wesley, descendant of the great Protestant reformer, and Ann Teachworth, who I first met on a plane. I just plopped down on one of my million journeys across the country, and there I found myself chatting up these amazing people, Ann and her hubby, who I had the privilege of having dinner with on a nerve tour not long ago, with your mom as well. Such fun. Welcome.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Thank you for being here and blessing our effort to energize the pocketbook of the lab, which we all benefit so greatly from. And it's so nice to be able to give back to the lab in this way, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really exciting to see the changes in the lab over the last year. You know, every time we come out, there are like these little changes that have happened, but the last time it was, you know, very new, exciting plans happening. So
yeah, we just keep swinging there, and also want to develop these high school programs as well, because that's kind of one of the exciting offerings that the lab has to the immediate community as opposed to the world at large, is to just bring in the youngins and let them get curious about anatomy in a really deep way. So how can I best introduce you to shining angelic beings? I'll mention for everybody that maybe, did you meet each other through Eric's work, through Eric Franklin?
We did, yeah.
That's how you know each other. And then you became peas in a pod, and now you have your own projects together, including teaching dissection at the lab. And I'll tell you, folks who are listening, I have walked in on Ann and Allie's classes numerous times, and I honestly feel like I've walked into my own class, because they so profoundly carry forward the energy of integral anatomy, but they make it better because they do embodiment stuff, which I'm like, you want embodiment, you got to go find teachers who can teach that. I give you the basics, and then other people put it into practice. So I'm so excited that you come and do that and bring that wonderful energy with you. So there's my introduction of you guys. Take it,
Perfect.
Allie.
Oh,
Take
and
it, Ann.
Gil, to be
I
fair,
miss.
I mean, you do integrate embodiment into your labs, which is why we love it so much. And also part of why we love that lab, the Institute. You know, one of the things that we feel like is missing in a lot of anatomical education is that it is just primarily informational, and
Hmm.
this tendency to treat the form as a specimen as opposed to as a mirror. And I think it's something that you and I imagine the other instructors that come and teach labs at the lab, like there's such a value on reverence and honoring, and also that the practice of engaging in dissection is not just information gathering, but that we would actually see ourselves more, know ourselves more, and then we see that reflected in other people and in our clients and in nature, and really this weaving together. And so for us, the embodiment practice, and really you hold the space for that very much. And then we just happen to have this particular training with Eric Franklin that, you know, uses specific tools that help it go deeper. Ali, I don't know if you want to say anything, or we want to dive in, or
We can dive in. I echo all the things, and you're one of our favorite people and teachers and leaders, and none of this could be possible without you. So I know that you're
Awesome.
going to hear that a lot this weekend, but it's like um we just we are just so grateful to know you and to have studied with you, and yeah.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the reminder that there is, I guess there really is an embodiment component in the class. And I observed it over the years because I started out teaching, I was a practicing rolfer when I started teaching anatomy. And I could observe that over the course of a week in the lab, it's like people had gotten rolfed. I was
Mhm.
like, look at them. They move differently. They feel themselves differently because of that mirroring event that happens. You know, as we go through the layers, you embody your own layers. And that's kind of it is one of the major impacts of it, even without me taking people, you know, into floor exercises or something like that. So
yeah,
thank you for
exactly.
reminding me of that.
Yeah.
And embodiment, I mean, it's kind of a buzzword that's going around these days, and it means a lot of
Mhm.
things to different people. And to
Yeah, what
me,
does it mean to you?
yeah, exactly. So to me, embodiment is a weaving together of mind and body.
Mhm.
An image that I've been using recently, like an analogy, is a sewing machine. So I don't know if you've ever watched how a sewing machine works. It's really interesting. You should
That's
Google it.
cool.
But the needle goes through the layers, and then it loops the thread around another thread, and it catches that and comes back up. And so my experience in embodiment with some really specific tools is this process of taking conscious awareness and dipping it down into our sensory experience, and then more intentionally gathering that sensory experience up into conscious awareness.
Mm.
And then as we do this, it creates this real like weaving together embodied cognition, embodied awakening experience, which is, I mean, it is what we are. And yet somehow we live in a world where we're completely disassociated. And Eric Franklin has put together really nice tools that help that specific process of, you know, mind, body, mind mapping. So
Mm.
using things like metaphors where we've had an experience before and we can use that. So we're going to guide you through a practice for 15 or so minutes, and we'll use some of these things.
Awesome.
But anatomical imagery, like the clearer our anatomical imagery is, and then when we use that as something to hook onto to give better mapping, that improves. So it's not just anatomical information, it's actually experience, but even touch and movement and things like this. So we're
Mm.
going to just go ahead and walk you through. And in our
Cool.
labs, we use Gill's integral anatomy approach. So we go like texture by texture. And one of the really fun things is to, you know, people have ideas of these tissues in terms of maybe the function that we learn in a book, but in the lab, you get to actually touch and feel and to discover it, not from a book, but there in the tissue. And
Mm.
so we invite people to start naming, like, what are the qualities that you're encountering in this layer, in this tissue, and then to encounter those qualities in you. Like these qualities are us. That's what's being expressed in us through these different layers. So we're going to just kind of guide you through like a speedy version of exploring through the layers with some embodiment and imagery and all that. Ready?
And yes, and on the way, I just want to acknowledge your awesome shirts. For those who didn't see them, embody you. Find out what you're made of. What awesome shirts. You guys are just too much fun.
That's us. That's what we do. Okay. So we are going to get started now. What can happen when we go into experience is our mind can be like, oh, great, time to check my email. But, you know, what I told Gil when we were talking about this session was that we have lots of interesting things to say about the body, but nothing is more interesting than what you could experience in your own body. So really, as we go through, the invitation is just to come into your own body, you're into your own form for some discovery. So you're welcome to close your eyes or leave them open. And we're going to begin focusing on the chest, specifically the layer of skin. So take your hands and place them very, very lightly over the chest, so lightly that it's barely contact. And take your awareness, your conscious awareness, to that point of contact. So rather than thinking about it, can you have your awareness right there? You might even sense a sense of like electricity between the skin on your hands and the skin on your chest. And rarely do we keep our attention at the layer of skin, right? We tend to dive down to muscle or bone or whatever our tissue that we work on is. So can you stay here at the layer of skin? And inquiring for yourself, what are the qualities that you associate with skin? And we might think about function like it's protection, it's sensation, vitamin D. And in the lab, we encounter this layer and we experience how durable it is. So durable. In fact, that, you know, we dulled the most blades on this day. And we also experience how malleable it is, how elastic and, you know, shape changing it can be, adaptable, and it's quite thin. So with your awareness right on your skin layer, take a deep breath, noticing just the skin movement as you breathe. Feel how much shape change happens with that deep breath, making space, expansion, stretch, spread. But also a sense of containment, durability, strength. Maybe you even feel the breath is happening at the skin, like skin movement is breathing. Breathing is skin movement. This layer is such an interesting layer because it is what separates us from what's around us, but it is also how we connect to what's around us, like how we sense, how we touch, how we contact. So it is separation, but connection. It is durability, but adaptability, malleability. And we're going to take fingertips and do really light little touches, little taps. Picture your skin like the top of a pond. And as you tap, you're sending little ripples through the pond. And that pond, that top layer of the pond that you're rippling through, that's that separation between air and water. And this whole world that's underneath that water. So let your little taps, your little raindrops on the pond explore all around the chest area. And just like a ripple in the pond, the ripple of vibration from your taps would spread out. So how far can you feel those ripples? How far can you sense the ripples rippling through these outer layers? And that rippling vibration also goes deep, right? Also goes into the body. So can you sense a rippling down into deeper layers? Moving into superficial fascia.
And we might let the hands start to slow down. And let's change the hand action to maybe a little squish. So can you start to feel what's underneath the skin? And here we have superficial fascia. So we have, very strong layer adipose embedded in connective tissue. And see if you can just take your hands around chest, even breast tissue, which tends to get left out of conversation and movement world. Right? And see if you can just start to discover the difference of texture between what we just tapped at the surface and now what's a little bit deeper. And to me, this feels a little bit more spongy and squishy and soft, but we also know from being in the lab that it's one of the strongest layers, right? It's actually very hard to pull apart. So much so, right? And it's so connected that it will create a pull on the whole sheet, the whole kind of stocking that it's connected to. So see if you can find that feel of the superficial fascia, maybe at chest or again, breast tissue, and just give a few lifts. And can you take your attention to the abdominal wall? Do you feel any lift there? So I think of this like a comforter or something that we're sliding around. So it's not just contained in one area, it's completely connected. It's one of our layers of connection, of intimacy. Also where we have a huge amount of strength and storage. So lots of energy is here. I know for myself, when I think about connection, I think about relationships. So this is just relating, right? The layers that are a little bit more outside to the layers that are inside. And we can start to have that experience between, right? So if we think of this as being a sponge, let's actually take just one hand now across, and you can explore, you can go a little higher. You can again go breast tissue and find areas that you actually experience that sponginess. And so if we did have a sponge, we can, from our hand on top, give a little squeeze and an unsqueeze. And of course, breathing, and see if you can just let yourself contact the sensation, right? The kind of 3D squeeze. So you feel it underneath your hand. And then where else can you feel that? Maybe that pull, that squish, that ripple, that connection. So like a massage, often this is what we're working with. Right? You can play with changing sides as you go. Is giving this squeeze from the outside. Of course, if I'm a sponge, I want to be squeezed. I want assistance in helping to get what's in me out, right? And to help make space for what I can bring in. So we can do this from the outside, but the cool thing about these layers is if we have muscle layers, so I'll just model this for a moment if you have your eyes closed. So we've got muscle, which we'll go into in a moment. We have our superficial fascia, and then we have skin. So we can squish from the outside with our hand, but we could also shape change with the muscle, contract the muscle from underneath, and we can really get a squeeze and an unsqueeze. So if you take one hand, and so I'm kind of feeling my superficial fascia, I'm going to see if I can feel my pec muscle contract. So if I push forward, right, you might feel the shape change, the shortening, kind of bulging of the pec underneath. Can you also squeeze with your hand? So can you give your superficial fascia a huge hug from under and from the top? Like squish and unsquish. Maybe this can help you start to also suss out and map out the layers. So you can start to put yourself in, okay, if that's muscle, I can feel muscle underneath. I can feel my hand on my skin. Can I find that layer and texture of superficial fascia right in between? And of course, there's a whole world of movement experience happening even deeper than this with the deep fascia and with the muscle layer.
So what I love about working through the layers is, to me, they're all like instruments in a symphony, and all of the instruments have such a different kind of quality, but they all come together to make this oneness. So as we shift gears into muscle and fascia, it's like turning the dial or starting to listen to a different instrument. So I just want to bring your awareness to a couple things at that deeper layer. And we're going to pay attention to pec and pec minor. So it's kind of like we have two fans here, pec minor coming down and in from the coracoid process. And then pec major is fanning in a different direction. And pec major going from the arm, relating across the chest. So when we have two things that have fibers in different directions like that, it means we have to have differential movement. And of course, we have Gil's famous perifascia to thank for all of that differential movement that we can have there. And the pec major also has kind of a loose edge. So you could take your hands over to that loose edge of pec major, and you might even kind of protract your shoulder a little bit. See if you can get under loose edge of pec major. And we're just going to give that a little squeeze like Ali was showing us. So we soften the edge, pec major, it's draping over pec minor. One of my favorite images to play with here is of polishing the pec minor with the pec major, or like soaping up the pec minor with the pec major. So you can think of your pec major like a big sponge now, and you're holding on to that big car wash sponge of your pec major as you move the shoulder. And as you do that, this slippery space between pec major and pec minor, and also the rest of the chest wall underneath it, can you imagine that you were like soaping up that chest body wall and pec minor, your favorite flavor of soap, or your favorite homemade soapy substance that you like to use. So just a little movement, you're holding on to that pec major, sliding, soaping. You might even reach the arm, feel how that moves this sponge that you're using to polish chest wall and pec minor. How slippery can that space be? Let that arm hang. The beautiful thing is it doesn't take very much. So you might notice the sensation on that one side compared to the other side, how that shoulder hangs. We could even take the arms out and just open to the side and see, do I have more space? And I have like a foot more movement happening on the side that I did a little kind of sponging on. So we can create, this is flexibility, but we didn't stretch anything, right? We just embodied function. Let's go over to the other side, but I'm going to invite your imagination. So I used a yellow sponge. Maybe you pictured that, but what if it's a different colored sponge? Or what color is your sponge of a pec major? What's the soapy flavor you want to feel with? What movement creates the most slide and slip of your pec major over the chest and pec minor? Breath is helpful. Having your awareness in that space. So sensing, feeling, what are the qualities of this slip and slide between layers? You might feel the muscles lengthening and shortening, a little force transfer through your fascia. Good. Just a little bit. And a breath. And then one more thing I want to sense at this fascial layer is the deep fascia qualities of force transfer. So across your sternum, you have the continuities from those pec major fibers kind of going in different directions according to the force. And then we also have little fibrous, the joint capsules that are over our God, all my words just got lost because I'm in my body. This is what happens. So the joints between your ribs and your sternum, lots of fibers there. So cross fiber friction. This is like when Gil's dissecting and he's like, words don't matter. So you have all these fibers going in lots of different directions across your sternum. Take your fingertips and we'll do a little friction, which is using more superficial layers to slide over the deeper layers. Work your way all the way down the sternum. You might feel the little joints, ridges there with their fibrous connections. And again, if we take our arms out to the side, you might discover even more space as you reach back. So these layers, the stretch or length is not just the muscle. That's just the fascial continuities, the fascial qualities throughout the body and those connections.
And then of course there's movement from way underneath at our lungs. So we have these models of like the orange, which is such a great model of a static body, but actually we're not static, right? So right now there's movement. As you breathe, there's movement from underneath the layer. So we'll just have a little experience of that. And you can take a hand to the top right above your clavicle. This would be your couple of the lung. And you can take your other hand lower down. It'd be around, 10th rib or something like that. And just take a few breaths and see if you can sense that there's a shape change underneath your hand. So there's up and down and out. You might even sense a more 3D kind of spiral between your hands just as you breathe. And feel free to try that out to each side as you go through. Of course, this is the layer where we are most alive, right? This is what's keeping us alive. So I think about working with the organs as the layer where we're actually encountering our aliveness. Right. And this requires kind of a deep listening to be able to tune into this. So once you've had a sense of this just continuous shape change, right? The lung changes shape, the ribs change shape. We can come back to just touching chest once again. And see if we can put it all together. So you can feel your lungs are changing shape. And can you sense all the layers that are interacting, all that we've gone through so far? So can you feel then the muscle layer, of course, interacting with the ribs, helping to create that shape change? And what is it like to imagine the lungs like silken pillows that are actually creating a response through muscle? Can you continue to think your way outward and sense the lungs creating shape change and differential movement into the superficial fascia? Can you feel your fat actually move? Can you feel it slide? And what about taking your awareness even lighter? So maybe you let your touch become a bit lighter, and can you sense your skin, right, moved by your lung? And I like to picture that all these layers are like silken scarves, like many scarves, that as we breathe, it's like slip, 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 slide, 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 slide. And can you continue to sense your way outward? Okay, so the beauty of embodied anatomy is that it helps you go inside, but it also helps us relate to what's outside of us as well, right? To be more present. So feel free to keep your hands there. You can let them go, but as you feel that shape change and that slip, 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 can you just start to come back into whatever room you're in? Maybe feel your interaction with the space around you, feel the distance between you and a wall or furniture or your computer. Of course, we can come back to our connection with our virtual world and feel now your space and your connection with each other and all the people sharing this time. And hopefully we're all feeling a bit more 3D. Maybe some appreciation for like, wow, all that's happening. Like I don't really have to, I mean, I love push-ups, but I don't need to do a push-up to feel my pecs. I can just breathe and live and feel this like, right, vividness of the body.
Well, that was fun. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for taking us all through our different, like, it's like we just went through different levels of the astral plane, but in the physical plane, go through the different vibrational frequency stacks that are our tissue textures.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it kind of feels that way, right? As you go to the different ones and you live there, it has a different frequency, a different vibration, and they're all
Absolutely.
weaving together, which is so, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
there's
wondrous.
your symphony, right?
Yeah.
You get all those the piccolo and the trombone and the kettle drum and the woodwinds
Yeah.
all singing together, creating a body
Yeah.
in space somehow.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in your first lab I ever was in, Gil, this finding different qualities and how they related to ourselves in each layer. And just, it's such an aha, right? It's like each one will reflect back a quality that, you know, either you haven't touched on in a while or might surprise you, or that's the thing, is it's not physical, or like Anne was saying, it's not like a specimen out there. It's like you are journeying through your own stuff. It's the most spiritual, sacred experience I think that is possible, right?
That's it. That's you got it. It comes as a surprise to folks too.
Yeah.
You know, when you do it this way, it's like, whoa, didn't bargain for encountering myself
Yeah.
and how I live. You know, how do I hang out there? Because some places we like to be and others we don't, and others we didn't know we had. It's like you're in a big house and there's two rooms you're in all the time, and there's a couple rooms you pass through, but you're not that into. And then there's some basement that you've never walked down the stairs. It's
Yeah.
like,
And you could
Yeah.
ignore it, but it's there, right? It's
yeah,
like
it's there.
you
It's
can
all
pretend it's not part of the house, but it is.
nice.
And what's
Yeah.
interesting is just practically, I mean, I teach anatomy and physiology also for massage therapists and yoga teachers. Ali does also. And we use this approach with, embodiment with our students, and they're adult learners, but a lot of them are people, then they're like, why are we not taught this? Like, why aren't we given this
Mm,
as kids? Because I believe that this disconnection from that symphony is what has us make choices that are maybe more harmful or not beneficial to us, and also more harmful to other people.
mm,
Because you can't like be in that symphony and not be amazed at what you encounter, but
yeah.
you're disconnected from it. It's like, why would I move my body? Why would I be kind to myself or
Well,
someone else?
we were just playing, and we ask our kids to stop playing too early.
Yeah.
And so we lose that connection, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for
That's
what,
why with the high school, I think that's why this is such a, with the lab, having like really young, fresh minds start to see this stuff. It's not just for them. It's not just for the lab. It's like, this actually could change the world. So, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
so.
How are folks going to find you after this encounter? Where can they
They can go to
be
our,
with you if not here watching the video over and over again?
yes, do it. Well, come to our labs. Our website is Embody You, so like university, embodyu.net. And we're on Instagram. We post little embodiments all the time, and as part of this virtual summit, you get our movement gift guide. So we take you through some of our favorite movements with embodiment practices along the way. Yeah.
Bodyu.net. And what else? So you got you're coming to the lab this year.
We have two labs. Yeah, we have July and October, and I think we have one spot left in July. We have a couple spots left for October. And I mean, there is nothing like it, there's nothing like that experience. It's like a retreat, getting to be out there, and we blend these embodiment practices in throughout the day, and put in some other a sound bath and like different practices to really help people just have an immersive experience. We're so nerdy. To me, it's like there's no better retreat in the world than going to the dissection lab. It's my happy place for sure. So yeah, come find us there.
So
And
we've got, and what about classes at large beyond the lab? Would we find them on your
so yeah,
embody.net?
Embody You. We have some evergreen classes that we've done prior. We have something on scoliosis. We have something on the foot, all about the foot. We could talk so much about the foot and the rest of the body. So we have a whole course on that. And then, we're ongoingly creating things. And then I also teach for manual therapists. So I have another company that I do that. Ali teaches classes online. So if you find us at Embody You, you can be directed to the various
That'll
offerings.
take us to the rest. Wonderful. Thank you so much, my dears.
Thank you. We
What a
love
great
you.
pleasure.
Yes.
I love you
We
too.
love the lab.
Me too.
Support the lab.
Support the lab, support the lab.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Folks, we're gonna have a couple-minute break. And then we're gonna bring on Jan Dommerholt, brilliant fellow, and we'll see you very shortly. We're back. We're back. With shortly, I think Jan should be appearing. Jan Dommerholt. Where are you, Jan?
I'm right here.
There you are. Nice to see you.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Long time no see, or a few months at
Few
least.
months, yep, indeed.
Thank you for gracing our summit.
It's been lovely so far, the part that I've watched, so it's worth it. It's all good.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have you here and always glad to have you at the lab. We folks in our audience are blessed with a incredible, an incredible group of smarty pantses. Jan is a massively published doctor of PT with books and articles and accomplishments that are too numerous to list. You're just going to have to be wowed by the man himself rather than his CV, which is quite spectacular. And while having Dutch heritage, you live in the U.S. now, and we're so happy that you do, because it makes us easier to learn from you. So thank you for being here, Jan.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So you cover a whole lot of territory in your career. Where do we begin?
Well, maybe start when I moved to the US. I born and raised in the Netherlands, moved to the US in 1986. As a PT, I was recently graduate. I worked briefly in the Netherlands, but not very long. Then I moved to the US. It was a bit of a challenge in the beginning to get licensed, to get to the whole bureaucracy. But once that was all taken care of, I worked in a hospital in Washington, D.C. Across the street in a neighboring hospital, I saw a webinar, not a webinar, those didn't exist yet then, and a workshop listed from Janet Travell, who I had no idea who that was. Although later, when I went back home after that evening, being 3 hours late, because I didn't realize the webinar of the workshop would take 3 hours in the middle of a busy workday. I came home quite late that day, but Travell was 89 years old, did a workshop telling doctors and physical therapists that they had it all wrong and they were incomplete, and they should better pay attention to what she called myofascial pain. Now, granted, Travell didn't really look at fascia. She coined that term myofascial, but she really never, if you look at the index of her books, fascia is not even mentioned in the second volume, and it's mentioned in the first one as trigger points in fascia, which was something she thought may exist or not, which is probably a bit outdated by now. So that was really probably the biggest turning point in my career, because I became pretty intrigued with that whole idea of myofascial pain. As poorly as it was developed at that time, it was basically Travell says, and therefore it is. And now it's a little bit different, I think. There's a lot of research, and I've certainly tried to do my best. So after that workshop, a few days later, I looked in the phone book. Remember, for those of you old enough to know what the phone book is, the phone book, and there was Travell in the phone book listed in Washington, D.C. So I called her up, and I was like, I'm really interested in learning more about what you showed in this workshop. And to my surprise, she said, what are you doing tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock? Is that nothing I know of yet? And she said, why don't you come by for some tea and cookies? And that's really what launched my career, to be honest.
How wonderful.
I became very interested in the whole myofascial pain world. That's an understatement. I became engulfed in that myofascial pain world. And as she said, I've done a lot of work in that since then. But it was really a turning point. So my other backgrounds, I used to be very active as a musician. Netherlands, I played in a Dutch military band as part of my obligatory military service at that time still. So I've always had an interest in working with musicians. So I've done that for many years. I'm one of the few PTs with a piano in the clinic. So it can help pianists to
Oh, nice.
play with them better and play with them and give them stuff to do at the piano. Other musicians have to bring in their instrument, but piano and organ is a little tricky to carry in every time. So that's why we provide a piano at least. So that's kind of what started my life in the US after overcoming some hurdles. So the whole myofascial part is really what took off. Out of that came the dry needling. And that was
tell
also
us about
also kind of happenstance because I didn't know anything about any of this. And I remember I joined Bob Gerben, who was is a neurologist. He's retired now for many years already. But Bob Gerben was kind of like a prodigy of Travell. And he said, "Oh, let's do it. I'm teaching a workshop. Why don't you come with me?" And an hour before the workshop, we said, "If you can go over Travell stretches." It was like, Travell stretches? I have no idea what you're talking about. Because for him, he had learned everything about musculoskeletal medicine from Travell. So for him, it was like second nature. And I was like, I have no idea what that means. So slowly but steadily, we started working together. He did tons of trigger point injections in those days. He didn't really do dry needling. I became a bit frustrated working in the clinic together with him. And it was lovely most of the time, but I was frustrated that I put dots on patients' bodies. He said, "You should probably inject that because it doesn't respond to any manual techniques that I knew at that point at the beginning of my career." And so at one point, I called the PT board and said, "Can I do needling myself?" And to my surprise, they said, "Yeah, you can." And later I learned I could even do injections in Maryland as a PT. It's the only state in the country where PTs can do injections. It's a very well-kept secret. I don't think anyone I know does it. But I did thousands of those. But the injections was kind of like, that seems more medical than I was comfortable with. I did a lot of it. I taught workshops in it, but the dry needling was pulling much more. I figured that really is something PT should be doing. We spend more time with patients, probably quicker, it's probably easier. And so from one start to the other, I had permission of the board to do this. There were no courses in the US at that time. So I went back to the physician and said, like, "Hey, can you teach me how to do dry needling?" He said, "I don't really do that." So I just watched him do injections. He said, "It can't be all that different. It's just the body. Maybe and I could do a different needling." So that's what happened.
Jan, let me ask you, for our audience's sake, what do you mean by dry needling? I mean, I know this is the ocean you swim in, but for folks who are unfamiliar with it, dry needling, is it baked in an oven? Like what? Dry needling? What?
It's kind of like
without injecting something? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's kind of like when you swim in the ocean, you get wet. When you swim on your floor, you stay dry, but you can go through the swimming motions. And to use an analogy, but dry needling really came out of that injection therapy practice. Travell did injections, Gerben did injections, and Travell every now and then would use that injection needle, that syringe, and touch whatever she thought was a trigger point, but without injecting something. That was referred to as dry needling, and that's what
that's so interesting. So it's the dry needling is kind of the child of injections.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the child of acupuncture.
Correct.
I see.
At least in my case. There are others who came more from an acupuncture background, perhaps. But in my case, and I introduced the first courses in the US in dry needling. We started that in 97. We first taught the course in 96 in Spain, kind of to try it out. And we had no idea what we were doing, to be honest. But it showed in some points we got much better over the years. So the dry needling in 79 was a paper by Karl Levitt from the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at that time, who used acupuncture needles. That was also referred. The term dry needling was first in the literature in the Lancet in 1947. So it goes back quite a while.
Oh, wow.
They really didn't become popular till the 80s. That's when slowly Chen Gun was a physician in Canada. He started doing something with acupuncture needles. I prefer to call them filament needles because I try to avoid the A word being acupuncture, because acupuncturists are not very thrilled that PTs are doing this.
Right. But basically, when the injections, what was being injected and maybe you concluded that it was the needling and not the substance that was actually giving you a positive effect? Is that how it flowed from that?
Correct. Travell preferred to inject procaine, which has a very short half-life, about 20 minutes, and it gets locally metabolized. So there's very little toxicity to the liver because the liver doesn't really care. It gets locally taken
Doesn't
care.
get there.
Doesn't get there, and it's gone in no time. So even if you infiltrate a nerve, which would temporarily knock out that nerve with the anesthetic, with procaine, by the time the patient gets off the table, it's gone, and the patient never even noticed. Most physicians started using lidocaine. Procaine was a little harder to get because no one makes money from procaine, so it's harder to get. Lidocaine is metabolized by the liver. And funny, most people use a very high concentration of 1 or 2%. Well, literature has shown that 0.25% is plenty. You really don't need a lot of anesthetic. And to me, the main advantage of that is that patients feel a little numb when you're done. None of these procedures are very pleasant. At least I don't think they're pleasant. They're kind of sore. They make you sore because it's pretty assertive. It's unlike most forms of acupuncture where they put a needle in subdermally, leave it sitting there for a little while and take it out. Dry needling that we do is much more so that needle goes back and forth to the same point quite a few times. So there's a lot of micro trauma to the tissues, all the tissues that the needle goes through. So it gets sore. And people take a couple of days, 1 or 2 days to recover just from the soreness. It's kind of like having a really bad workout without having to work out. I mean, it's probably the same kind of micro trauma to the tissues as you work when you do a lot of weightlifting.
So it's not like a single insertion, but it's poke, 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 poke.
We put it in once. If I want, that's my target. I put the needle in the skin like this, and I hit that spot. I pull it back to the subdermal superficial fascia. Then I go back and try to hit the same spot with slightly different, but micro-directional changes. That's really how it's done. But now, in the first 10 years, we were the only people to teach this in the country and in many other countries. I've traveled all over the world doing this. Now there are 45 or so companies that teach some form of dry needling, and now you see pretty much any variation under the sun.
You spawned an industry.
I definitely did. And if I had known that would happen, I would have done things a little bit different, probably. and prevent some of the really silly things that are happening now. I mean, some people are just, I understand we all have to start somewhere. When I started dry needling courses, I really was not qualified to do this either. So that's always the problem when you start with something. But now there are quite a few courses that if people would really need to look at the qualifications of the people who teach it, because there are really good courses available, not just from us, but from several other institutes are fine too. But I'd say 40 of them are not worth spending your money on. But that's, again, I'm pretty biased, obviously.
Well, and you should be. So what is the effect? Why do you do that?
Well, dry needling is probably, at least in my experience, and also the literature really supports that more and more, one of the quickest ways to get people out of pain. The main indication is pain reduction. So I've published, was it 2-3 years ago, a systematic review, meta-analysis of physical therapy about treatment for migraine headaches, cervicogenic headaches, and other headaches. There's a significant amount of evidence that dry needling very quickly reduces pain. Which, once people have less pain, they will start moving again, rather than lying on their back because they have back pain or headache or whatever. And so the whole paradigm of what to do in physical therapy, but also in general, has changed a lot. It used to feel very passive. Now it's really part of a pain science education package. We educate people like, hey, when you have pain, that's probably not a sign you need to lie down, but a sign that you haven't moved enough. Like movement is the key now. Quite a dramatic change in my lifetime that I've been doing this, but it makes an awful lot of sense. Like movement in the end is the key. So we use dry needling mostly for pain. At least in my clinic, I have a physical therapy clinic in Bethesda, Maryland. Most people who come to us have pain. They want to get rid of pain, and usually you can do that very quickly. Other indication is reducing spasticity, like for cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis after a stroke. People have spasticity. I actually have some slides. I can show you that later if you want to go over that. I kind of left a whole lot of things over and see where the discussion would take us. Spasticity is really an upcoming field. So dry needling for neurological conditions is something relatively new, but also quite dramatic. It is quite amazing. And the last thing, and that's probably a little closer to where we are with the lab, we also needle for scar tissue and fascial adhesions. And that's really quite interesting. That is, to me, the most intriguing, along with the spasticity, because those are both fairly new. The rest done for so long, it's kind of like, okay, I know how that works. But the spasticity and the fascial stuff is really quite striking, like how fast you get results. Like people with scars, let's say C-section scar, any orthopedic scar or gynecological, doesn't really matter. The scar that was sutured should not be painful 5 years later or 9 years later. And yet most scars that I palpate in the clinic, I get a little obsessed with scars. When I see patients having a scar, it's like, how long have you had the scars? Is that scar giving you any trouble? They always say no. You ask more questions, say, well, I can't wear tight underwear, like tight panties, because it presses on the scar and that hurts. So people change what they wear because of the scar. And that you can treat with needling so effectively. It is one of the quickest things to get rid of.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter how long that scar has been there.
That's so interesting. So you go into the scar.
I go into what I palpate, like adhesions around that scar. Usually it's not the scar itself, it's around the scar.
Okay.
Because, as you well know, scar tissue, what we see in the skin is just the tip of the iceberg 9 or 10 times.
Yeah.
So I remember one case in the lab, which now we do, but pretty much anyone in the United States, any female who donates their body to the lab to become our teachers, if they're female, they almost always have a C-section scar. That's a US problem, I believe. And it's striking and sad in a way, but so we always try to look now, like, where can you find that scar tissue? Let's take a look at all the layers. And I vividly remember one case where Jim and I were looking at that with a full group of physios mostly. That scar tissue wrapped around every internal organ, around the colon, and it went all the way down. It's visible. You could just look at it all the way down to the lumbar multifidi. And then you wonder, like, okay, what kind of symptoms did this person have? And most of the time, we don't have their medical history. Were they diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome? Did they have pain? Did they have whatever? It could be so many different things. Were they able to move properly? So in one of our courses, and that's a video we actually have on the MyoPain website, was a woman with an abdominal scar. She got it when she was a little child, like 3-4 years old. She was treated or demonstrated upon in the course. And after that, she said she was perplexed. She said, this is the first time I can stand up straight in 46 years.
Wow.
That's her was 46 years old, and one treatment all of a sudden gets rid of it.
Amazing.
Which makes me question the common knowledge that scar tissue is fibrotic tissue. If we can change with a needle, is that really fibrotic tissue? I kind of doubt that, to be honest. Because if it's just contractured and is so wrapped up and so stuck, and we can put tension on it. So we use a slightly different needle that has a little more traction. So we put the needle in that tissue, turn the needle, and then all these fibers coil around that needle, and you cannot pull the needle out after that. That is absolutely impossible.
It's locked in.
It's totally locked in, and we just wait. And after a while, it just lets go and the needle almost falls out. And then usually that pain is gone and the mobility has improved dramatically. So that's so interesting.
So interesting. It's like, I'm just thinking of like an octopus that's tangled in a knot around something. And if you pet it the right way, it's just like, just let's go.
That's correct. It's very similar to that. It's really very similar. And it's kind of amazing to me that that's possible.
Yeah. Well, it causes you to have to just reframe your whole conceptualization of like the life force that's going through those tissues, that the intelligence, that it's like you said, not just a clump of dumb tissue that's gotten glued together, but that it's actually all of the intelligence of life in a knot that can unknot itself if it's coaxed.
But it clearly is not just fibrotic tissue. I really have to question that. If it's real fibrosis and there's like different tissue, that shouldn't respond like that. So we
Yeah.
don't really know why that works. I mean, I'm doing research right now. I do a lot of research with Iranian physical therapists. I had the pleasure of going to Iran several times before. I was actually in Iran when the former guy in the White House decided to stop that nuclear contract. I was in Tehran at the moment, like, oh my God, could you not have waited another week that I was out of here? It was not good timing. It was not good timing for lots of reasons, but definitely not for my sake. It worked out fine. So, but I still have a lot of context. So we're actually now doing studies together with Robert Schleib from Munich, one of the fascia people that you know well, to kind of figure out what actually changes when we do that technique. How far does that spread away from the actual scars? Are we taking measurements? We in about 80 people, we're trying to do this, live people, not cadavers.
Interesting.
Really take a look at what happens because we don't really know why it works. I have lots of ideas, and when I first presented those to Robert Schleib, said, "No, that can't be." He was pretty resolute. He's like, "No, that's not why." He's like, I thought that was smart, and I figured it out." But he pretty much dismissed everything I said. But he also did not know why it worked either. So I was like, "You're saying that because you don't have a better answer either." If Robert is listening to this, like we're good friends, so he can handle that.
No, Robert is a very curious person.
It's great. Yeah. It was very interesting. But so we're doing these studies. We've done several case reports like, hey, it really works. And it also people in Iran, and they did it a little different than I do. I think actually with scar tissue needling, you need just a few needles because it's so three-dimensional that you put tension on that system. It influences everything in that area, in a probably very wide area. So they're all very interesting things to play with. And the lab helps us with that because we can actually show that to people. I could put a needle in a cadaver's fascia and it lock in just as much.
Yeah.
You cannot, the first time I went to the lab, I actually went as a student. I took a course there and there were only 6 students. And 4 of those were instructors from myopane seminars, so dry needling instructors. Of course, we brought needles. The instructor won't do with those. It's like, well, we got to check some few things.
For sure.
We put in that needle. I have a video of that actually, and the instructor said, "I don't believe that." He tried to pull it out and he could not. With all the force in the world. Now, in a human living person, we wouldn't do that obviously because if you pull it out, you probably rip everything apart.
Yeah, it'd be very irritating.
It would be quite annoying. But in the cadaver, it was impossible to pull out. Eventually, let's go.
Well, that's the thing too. I've had many needling experiments in the lab over the 30 years, and they never fail to astonish us, both in the reach of the needle, like, in other words, how that insertion and a bit of twisting can be palpated at a great distance.
Yeah.
By, sensitive and clumsy individuals, even without so much or any training. And we've done it with screens between the inserter and the palpator, and it's astonishing and interesting.
It's astonishing, yes.
Yeah. Now I know, Jan, you are also having a deep involvement with hypermobility issues. And I'm super curious if you would share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that also kind of started, I think that unfortunately, a lot of clinicians, when you observe something in the clinic, a lot of people is like, "Oh, that's weird," and move on. And not really wonder like, what actually happened? So I remember many years ago, we had some patients in our clinic who, in retrospect, were clearly hypermobile, and we had no idea what that was all about. I mean, I'd never learned about hypermobility in PT school. It is rarely covered in medical school, even PT school today. It's probably a little bit better than it was, but not really.
Which is a great shame. It's such a huge issue.
No question, because I mean, the number of people, the estimates right now, as they stand, that 1 in 3,000 people are hypermobile.
I think it's more.
But that's the official.
That's the story. It's incredible, right?
It's probably more than that. I would agree with you, Gil.
Yeah.
But so we had this lawyer from England came over to our clinic, and he had been hospitalized twice in a psychiatric hospital because everyone said he was crazy. Now, he was a little bit weird. He was like Monty Python live. It was kind of funny if you could take a step back, but
I can relate to that.
he was kind of, yeah, he was kind of an interesting guy. And I remember when we needled his deltoid trapezius, I don't remember which one, his arm literally dropped that far in the socket. And we were like,
Wow.
what just happened?
Holy cow.
So we were lucky. I feel very lucky in that sense because one of the world's top geneticists in hypermobility worked at the National Institute of Health, which is 2 minutes from my clinic. So we contacted
You were in the heart of it.
and she was happy to come over and spend the day with us. And we brought in some younger ladies, teenagers, and she would demonstrate, this is what you do, this is what it's all about. That grew into a monthly meeting with anyone who's interested. There was a neurosurgeon on it, there were neurologists, geneticists.
Oh.
I was the only PT we did that for years. Every month we met. Sometimes it was case studies. Sometimes we invited someone to speak about something to kind of learn about what is going on with this EDS world,
Yeah.
the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome world of hypermobility. And slowly, but that kind of kept growing. And my clinic is now one of only 22 centers in the world recognized as an EDS center of excellence.
Wow.
So I'd say about 30–40% of our patients have hypermobility, and that's the reason they come to us, because it causes so much trouble.
So Jan, is this also something that you're working with the dry needling, or is it totally different approaches?
We do dry needling as well, but very carefully, because I have a hypothesis that is not proven at all, just my own hypothesis. I think that when you're hypermobile, that when your joints are so loose that the connective tissue do not support your joint, you will create contractures in your muscles around these joints and to hold everything in place. Well, that very quickly leads to oxygen deprivation, the pH drops, and you very quickly move into this whole myofascial pain concept. And all these people, 98% of people with hypermobility have painful joints. I don't really believe that joints are the source of the pain. I think it's the muscles around these joints that are the source of the nociception. So when we treat, like in a British lawyer, the barrister, I think he called himself, when we needled that structure, that support system that he had developed, let go, and his arm dropped out of the socket. So with EDS, you have to be quite careful.
Right. You take someone apart too.
You take that mobility, although it's a dysfunctional form of mobility, if you take the mobility too quickly away, you create so much more instability that people really can't move anymore.
Yeah, I think, these insights.
We do dry needling with quite a few EDS patients, not with everyone, but we always, and that's true for all patients, not just EDS, we always combine that with what I like to call external focus exercise, which is a whole other thing.
What do you mean by that?
Rather than focusing on your body, like say, hey, this is your biceps and focus, and this is, let's say core muscles, even a better example. PTs are a bit obsessed about your core. You always have to contract your transverse abdominal muscle, and there's no one in the world who can really do that. But we always say that. But if you put someone, if you think that's a clinician, that's an issue, that people have no bodily support, no joint support, why not put them on something unstable? Like a little surfboard. We have these big wooden surfboard things, or we have a Bosu ball or something wobbly. It doesn't really matter, whatever the patient can handle. And then you have them knock out lights on the wall that completely, like blaze spots. We use those a lot in the clinic. When you're standing on something unstable and you have an external focus rather than an internal focus on, I need to contract my core, as soon as you start thinking about it, you're not doing it and you're not doing anything else.
Yeah.
You can't really go shopping thinking about your core.
Yeah.
Once you start focusing on, do I need to get milk and which kind? Your core is gone.
Yeah.
So you're better off training you inherently, like automatically, so that it becomes an automated pattern rather than a cognitively learned pattern.
Yeah.
So external focus, there's a ton of research on that. It's much fun. I can show you videos of that if we have time. We have a lot of options to show people, but it's just fascinating. So yes, there is some dry needling, but there's a lot more focus on exercise.
That's so exciting. I would love, I personally want to learn more about that. And we are sadly this is a quickie.
Yeah, I know,
I would
I know.
so enjoy to talk to you for like another 3 hours on any one of these topics. Jan, how can people learn more from you? I want everyone to know, including
Yeah,
me.
so I have two companies. One is the course company that's called MyoPain, MYO Pain, like our words, MyoPain seminars.com. And that's what the courses are.
MyoPainSeminars.com.
MyoPainSeminars.com. And the clinic is in Bethesda, Maryland, and it's called Bethesda Physio Care. PHYSIO Care, Physio Care. And that's also, I think that's also BethesdaPhysiocare.com, if I'm not, yeah, I think so.
BethesdaPhysiocare.com. And that is, one could find your way to that also through the first website, which was
I'm sure. Yeah, or you just Google my name, I'm sure you'll find it. I have no doubt.
Jan, you are a treasure and a massive and fascinating resource. I feel so lucky to have had this conversation with you, as I know the people in our audience would agree. And I hope that they'll track you to those two spots and learn much more. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for patronizing our lab. Thank you for supporting our summit. We're most grateful to you, Jan.
Well, thank you for the invite and be able to chat with you. It's lovely.
Awesome. It's a pleasure. Folks,
Okay.
we're going to have bye-bye. We're going to have a couple-minute break, and we're going to come right on back and meet Kathy Dooley. We have quite an amazing slate of people today. This is so much fun. I can't wait to see her and y'all in Woohoo!
Hi.
I see Kathy. We got to turn you into a big box instead of a tiny one.
Oh,
There you are. We've caught you at the drive-in breakfast bar.
I'm actually on a road trip. I'm on a 15-hour road trip.
How wonderful. Where are you going?
We're driving. My father passed away in 2020, and he gave me a piano, a synthesizer, and it's very, very heavy. And so I had to drive from my mom's in Indiana back to Colorado.
Which way are you headed?
Right now we're in Missouri, so we are heading west.
You're heading west. Go west. Go
Go
west, young
west.
woman. Fantastic. Well, I'm delighted that you could stop even on your road trip. I understand this very well because I have been on the road with Rachel for months, and we do all of these events, except for this one. We happen to be home from our camper. So I totally understand the media on the road kind of thing. So I'm so grateful that you could still visit with us.
Yeah. Hold on one second for me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. Kathy, you are a doctor of chiropractic,
Mm-hmm.
an acupuncturist as well,
Yes.
and an anatomy teacher of great repute.
Oh, thank you.
and
Not as much repute as you, sir. But
well, let's just pile our reputes together.
I like it.
and, and enjoy it. So which came first? Anatomy teacher,
Oh,
chiropractor,
chiropractor. Yeah,
chiropractor first?
chiropractor came first. That's where I got bitten by the anatomy bug because I had to do human dissection for that.
Mm.
And then going into acupuncture while I was in chiropractic school and finishing that when I was going through my anatomy degree. Anatomy actually came last along with finishing acupuncture. So
Cool. And but that you seem to be on the, I mean, do you still practice as a chiropractor and acupuncturist?
yes,
Oh, you do
both.
both?
I do chiropractic and acupuncture in Colorado. I do only chiropractic in New York because New York's got weird rules for chiropractors
Oh.
doing acupuncture. And then anatomy, I teach in New York City.
Oh, that's where you teach it. Well, you teach there a lot too, but I didn't know you taught in New York City. Where in New York City do you teach?
Yeah, I teach at NYU, Cornell, and Einstein Med.
Oh, how cool is that? So you're a commuter
Yes, every week.
every week?
Yes.
You just traipse back and forth the country every week?
Yeah, I work for two pharmaceutical companies also, teaching anatomy for injection. And
Ah,
so I could be anywhere at any given moment. So
wow, that's amazing.
yeah,
So
I'm lucky. I'm really lucky.
yeah, yeah, it's not easy always to make it all work together. And I know you know, I stopped my Rolfing practice so that I could do my full-time anatomy gig.
Mm.
And I think that was more just because of my passion for being in the lab over my passion for putting my elbow on someone's butt. But
Well, I heard that you're also an amazing rolfer as well. Structural integration is an amazing field. So you contribute to us in so many ways. We're very lucky.
it was the weirdest thing that people would be improved. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. How did you get better? They're like, well, you were working on it. I was like, well, that's very generous, but I think it must have been the angels. I'm not sure.
You don't give yourself enough credit.
So because you are a massively expansive resource, I noticed on your little pre-prep thing that you shared with us that you have a keen interest in intervertebral discs. And let's talk about that. I'm super
Okay.
curious about your
Oh,
insights in that
yeah.
for
I have
having
some.
dissected thousands of intervertebral discs.
Definitely. It's
Yeah.
really fun. And I think as a chiropractor, that's where my interest started. And then when you
Mm,
have your own intervertebral disc problem, which I had in my 20s, that became super interesting to me, like the whole concept of radiculopathy and sciatica. And I just
mm.
wanted to share with, the amazing, donors today and people that are interested and contributed to AIR, the incredible disc. And hopefully you get to see it with Gil and some of his amazing videos. If you do a dissection course at Institute of Anatomical Research, I highly advise doing that. It's a beautiful facility. Please go and be a part of things. But
Well, thank you. Where did your own disc issues start? Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Were you a dancer? How did you hurt yourself?
No, I think it was just being human, like everybody, like our intervertebral disc, and for you folks that are so interested in anatomy, hopefully I can spark your interest in looking at the disc, because so many patients have problems with disc, so many people have problems with disc because we're bipeds. You don't really hear as much about quadrupeds having discogenic issues because they're not load bearing on two limbs with all of the gravitational force coming down onto the disc. And the disc is so special. It's part of a symphyseal joint, right? These central line joints, and it has fibrocartilage mixed with other types of type 1 and type 2 collagen. And it has this paste on the inside that's so weird. And the paste is supposed to encourage this distortion when you have this kind of fibrous outer line that's trying to resist and shock absorb for you. So you have this mixture of shock absorption and buttressing, and it's quite fantastic. So I think what's so special about the disc is its resiliency until it's no longer resilient. And the places where we get these problems are L4, L5, L5, S1. And
is that the main, I mean, is that like a statistic or something? Like if it's going to go off, it's going to go off there for sure first, or
it's about a 95% tendency in Homo sapiens for it to be between L4, L5, L5, S1 if they have a true disc herniation. And not that all problems are disc herniations. Like you can have a disc problem and it not be disc herniation. It can be an end plate problem. It can be the disc doesn't have a whole lot of blood. And so when it starts to get blood, that's where the pain can come in for a disc.
What do you mean by end plate problem for our audience?
Yeah, exactly. Like, so the disc, it weirdly is connected via these little fibers to the vertebrae above and below, right? So it has to stay anchored to it, and it stays anchored through a part, it's actually the bone and not the disc, but it's considered to be part of the complex, and that's called an end plate. So think of it being like the end of the vertebrae on the top and bottom. And
so
that
the bony geographical endpoint.
Yes. And so that is like our vascularized portion. And that's where your hyaline cartilage is. And hyaline cartilage is more dynamic because of its blood supply, right? And then you have this disc that doesn't have a lot of blood supply, that has some innervation from a branch of your spinal nerve called the sinovertebral nerve. So it has an innervation. It has the ability to.
We're losing Kathy.
Kathy. The sympathetic nervous system as well as.
I think, Kathy, I'm gonna I want to hear everything you're saying, but we've lost you. She's gone into the kind of that inside of a galvanized can thing where it's and it gets a little strange. Now, Kathy, come back. We miss you. I want to hear more about intervertebral discs. We're mid-sentence.
Better now?
I think I keep talking. We'll see if I can hear you. No, I got nothing. Yeah, once you pulled out of the gas station, things started getting weird. It was so I could vamp on intervertebral discs until Kathy comes back because they are super cool. It's like Saturn. Saturn's got rings, right? So you have this like kind of cartilaginous core, and then it's rings, like if you had cut a tree right down the center and looked at it edge on. And when you look at a disc cut the same way, it literally looks like you've sliced a tree in half, and you could count the rings of the tree and say how old it is now. That doesn't correspond to a human person's rings, because that's not like I am 60, but I don't have 60 rings in my discs. We would have comparable amounts of rings in our discs, adults, from one to another, regardless of age. So it doesn't count, although they call them the annular fibers. It's not meaning annual fibers like on a tree. So your disc has that, and then it kind of lines up with the vertebra above and below. So there's this beautiful continuity going through them, and they can get a little bulgy. Now, Kathy was talking, oh, I see her flashing in the distance. There she is. Bring her back, Jim. Bring her back. There you are.
You were talking about disc. I heard it. And I was like, I can hear you, Gil.
You could hear me, but we could neither see nor hear you.
I could hear you, and I was like, oh, they can't hear me. You're saying beautiful things. Keep going.
So we were right at those end plates, and we were learning about that being a more vascular part of the disc. And so take us from there.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So when the disc starts to get damaged at the annulus, the fibrous part of it, think of it like a jelly donut where there's like fiber on the outside and jelly on the inside. As you start to get cracks in the annulus, what'll happen is you can start to vascularize the disc through the end plate. And that's part of the most, the current research is that some of the pain that we get is because of this hypervascularization, because the disc doesn't normally have a good blood supply. But now all of a sudden you're giving it good blood supply, and with blood comes the responsibility of feeling pain and chemical changes and inflammatory cascades. And so that's how you get the discitis that's kind of associated with things. Like you can actually get disc inflammation. So not all disc pain is from herniation. And in fact, people with herniation hardly ever have back pain unless they also have hypervascularization of the disc or damage to the end plate.
Now, do you get that from like interviewing the person to understand how they would describe the kind of pain that they're having?
Yes.
I'm thinking it's hard to palpate that probably.
Nearly impossible, but unless you have a good scalpel like Gil has. But the problem, of course, comes from the fact that a lot of people will be nervous to touch that area or to palpate. And I'm like, well, start asking questions like, do you feel pain when you do these certain things, and where do you feel it? Do you feel a distribution that's truly a dermatome, which is an area innervated by a spinal nerve? Is it actually disc, or does it actually happen because of the disc itself and these cracks that are in it? That usually will get exacerbated when the pressure is placed on those points, right? So if someone has what's called a positive Kemp's test, where you kind of bend into the sites of things like side bend or extend into it, that might, encourage some discomfort, versus someone that has like true nerve pain because the contents of the disc are hitting the nerve. That could be someone who touches their toes and their feet go numb.
Oh, okay. So your side bending could be causing an irritation, but when you, and the other, so that would be the hypervascularization, but the forward bending and the numbness, that would be nerve pain. Are there any other options? What else do we have?
There are other options. There's and instructional integrators like yourself, they tend to know this, and chiropractors know this, and some massage therapists know this, acupuncturists know this, but when I talk to the medical field, it's a little bit, they're a little bit confused by a concept of pain referral called sclerotome referral, sclerotogenous referral. And that comes from things that are ligament or bone. And it feels like a nerve distribution, but it's not burning and it's not numbness. It's more pain or dull aching. And that happens typically when you're approximating or de-approximating the bones. So when someone has a disc problem, that happens.
And in that case, in that third option, would that would be a referred pain?
Yes.
So you're going to feel that and the referral site would be what would enable you to trace it back to, say, L5, S1 or something like that.
That's exactly right. And, if you guys look on Immaculate Dissection's website, we have these posters that have like nerve referral that is nerve root versus sclerotome referral, which is more disc or bone or ligament. And we're not the only company that makes those charts, but you want to have those charts in your office so that you can have the patient point to say, which one is you?
Yeah.
Are you this one? Are you that one? They love it too, because they're like, that's me. And then you get an idea of how to match that to your exam.
ImmaculateDissection.com, just making sure people caught that, because you said those syllables really fast and I wanted to make sure people heard it. ImmaculateDissection.com for that. So okay, you've parsed it out. Now what do you do? Right.
Then it becomes the treatment of discogenic problems are different based upon the type of problem that you have. Like someone who has stenosis is going to have a different treatment plan than someone who doesn't. And like people that have a disc herniation, they're tending to be more flexion intolerant. They don't want to touch their toes. They don't want to tie their shoelaces. Versus someone with discogenic pain, they may be someone who can tolerate that, but they can't tolerate extension as much. So you really have to, it's easier than you think, because it's like, what makes it worse for you? What makes it better? Like really listen to the patient and then start to give them an ID, an immaculate dissection. We call it load sharing. Try not to put all the pressure on one spot, like a disc, and try to share the load with all of the lumbar vertebrae. And so teaching someone how to distribute forces across rather than them being pinpointed. It's kind of like when you bend a paper clip on one spot, it breaks on that spot. But if you bend the paper clip all throughout the paper clip, you actually make a more resilient paper clip.
So you're improving people's paper clip status here.
Yes, telling them not to bend on one spot. Patients always get that. I say, what happens if you bend?
We're losing Kathy again. She's disappeared. Come back, come back. We're mid paper clip. I wonder if she can hear me.
On that spot. Like, that's right. Yeah, can you hear me?
Not really. We're having a very dynamic.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I turned my video off to save bandwidth, because we're going through Illinois and there's like some weird blocking of my signal.
Some weird Illinois thing going on there. Yeah, I think you may be easier to hear than to see.
Yes. How about now? Is this better?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Not through the patch. Okay, great.
So now you're not only running these clinics where you're helping people, but you're also continuing to explore these questions in the lab, huh? Nope. No audio, no visual.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Kathy?
Hi, sorry about that.
That's all right. So I was just segueing into curiosity about what you're exploring in the lab. Nope, we got nothing. I'm back to vamping, folks. So I'm going to tell you that Kathy comes to the lab. She brings groups multiple times, and they are ferocious in their exploration of anatomy. And Kathy also works with an amazing artist. I think his name is Danny Quirk. Is that possible that I'm remembering that correctly? I hope so. Danny draws on people and does unbelievably beautiful artwork. I remember spotting his artwork on Facebook or something years ago and thinking, holy cow, this dude is really interesting. I'd love to meet him. And that's actually how I learned about Kathy's work, was through this artist that she works with, who does sort of anatomical art on people's bodies. And I mean, body painting is ancient art, but when we see it done anatomically, it's often fanciful, let's say. But Danny's artwork, Kathy's friend Danny, is incredibly informed by their explorations in the lab. So it's so many directions that people take the lab work, right? Folks come from such a variety of things. You get an artist in there, and where are they going to take it? So Danny takes it to vibrant, beautiful body art, which makes it so easy to learn anatomy, because we don't always have the transparency of dissection work available to us. I'm wondering if Kathy is pulling off on the side of the road somewhere. I don't know. I don't want to make up stories for her, because her knowledge base is so huge and interesting and different from mine. These clinicians really astonish me, and I'm just in awe of just something like, yeah, how you can test and determine just differently. Well, we've got we've got disc pain in this direction. That's going to tell us we have hypervascularization. We have numbness in this direction. Now we've got bulging on a nerve. And it's just like so cool. Maybe that's, I don't think that's common knowledge. I think that's really specialized knowledge and super cool. Hey, Jim, how are you? Do you think we're going to get her back? I hope we can. So we'll see. So
I see nothing so far.
You see nothing so far. I think she went into an Illinois vortex there
Yes.
and vanished. It can be hard to maintain a connection while driving because even if your connection was perfect, then phone switches from one cell tower to another, and you get a gap or it doesn't reconnect. So. So what else do you want to know about discs? Maybe I'll talk about Z's discs, huh?
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, because I do have at gilhelly.com dissections of discs on camera in the Anatomy from A to Z project. And I do quite a careful study of Anna and Z's spinal columns because, well, there they were, so interesting and amazing. I literally went disc by disc, vertebrae by vertebrae, except in Z's case where, there were blocks of fused vertebrae. And often people think, oh, say you see in the lab a bulging disc and you think, oh, that person must have had pain. Well, not necessarily, like Kathy was saying, it's not necessarily symptomatic. You won't necessarily feel a darn thing because your discs are bulging. We are lumpy critters. And I'm constantly fascinated and sometimes amused at the reactions of folks to the non-symmetry or the astonishing weirdness, let's say, of the human body when we look inside of it, because we're so accustomed to this exacting symmetry of artistic representations of the body, which are the first indication that they're kind of the product of the mind rather than reflections on the actual human form, which, being fractal and unique, is never perfectly symmetrical, never linear, always spiraling, always curving and arcing. I always think I should have learned, what do you call it? Physics. Not physics. What is it? Calculus. Calculus is that mathematical discipline for kind of calculating spaces on curves, where we're seeing that, because that's all we have in our body. And so when people see the real thing in the lab as compared to artistic renderings, they're just astonished that it's like. And then you go back to yourself and you say, oh, I don't have to be symmetrical. I'm not symmetrical. And so that plays out in the discs as well, where you look at any given spinal column, and I'm talking to a number, every single spinal column has lumps, bumps, twists, sticky outy bits, osteophytes, fusions, all of them. And when you look at that and you think, oh, that must have been so impairing, it's like, no, it's not impairing necessarily. It's just reality. It's just what our bodies are like. We're not like those models that you see stamped out of forms that are perfectly symmetrical. So I'm sad that we don't get to have more of Kathy here. And I would be showing you some pictures of this at this point. But I'll tell you this, part of the also excitement of working in a lab, well, you use your different instruments. The primary instrument is your hand, but of course you do need a scalpel at times. And when working with the spinal column, I found a couple of surprising things. One is that you can just cut through the vertebral column with a scalpel blade. You don't need a saw or anything because of those abundant cartilages, and they do yield, just like the pubic symphysis, they yield very easily to the scalpel blade. So that gives you just a notion about the textures. Bone doesn't yield to the scalpel blade. You can poke it and the blade goes ping, and it doesn't want to go any further because of the density of the bone. But when you bring it to the cartilage, it yields quite easily, and that tells you something. You can tell by the instrument you're using and the way that you apply it to the body, something about the texture of the tissue that you're encountering. So the cartilages are so very different from the bone itself. But then occasionally, and this is sort of distressing, I'll take the blade and put it to the bone and it goes in. Now that is osteoporosis, right? So where your cartilages are actually sturdier in the vertebral column than the bone itself, where people can become so spongy in their vertebral column, then I can actually just pass the scalpel blade into the vertebrae. And those people are at huge risk from falls and such. And I won't say they're few and far between. I'm surprised at how much osteoporosis we do find in our elderly forms and can demonstrate that in the lab, particularly when we do skeletonization classes. And you can just sort of test around the body with the scalpel how the bone holds up. So that would be a whole other story that I'd love to hear more from Kathy about, maybe the next time that we visit with her, because we know she'll be back to the lab. You could find out more about Kathy's lab courses at her website, immaculateDissection.com, and possibly find your way there to her colleague, Danny, as well, if you want to appreciate some of the amazing art that they've produced and shared with the world there. And Kathy will also be back at the lab. I'm not exactly sure when, though. Jim, do you know when Kathy's coming back to the lab? Do you have that schedule available? You could kind of chime in here so that we could let folks know how they could meet up with Kathy in the lab as well at the Institute for Anatomical Research.
I am looking.
He's looking, folks. Let's see what he's got. Well, short of being able to announce it here, we can at the very least encourage you to go to immaculateconception.com and see if you can find Kathy's schedule there, as well as links to her workshops, her work, her clinic, and her travels, no doubt.
Yeah, I can't find it on here. I'm missing it somewhere.
No worries. Well, it is actually 11:41 and time to move on to our dear buddy, Jim Donak. So let's head on to Jim. Is Jim in the background here?
Yes, I am.
Cool. Whoa. So
Hello.
nice to see you, buddy. Jim's going to highlight you. So you are in the spotlight. There he is.
Yay.
Oh, that's your little logo that I saw up there. That's so cool. Come close to the camera. I want to see that. Wow, what does that mean?
It's Chinese characters, head, upper extremities, lower extremities, and qi radiating out to the 5 limbs.
That's you in a nutshell, buddy. I'm here to testify that this dude's got chi. He's got chi like exploding to the universe, concentrated in his powerful form, and also in his head, where he stores a ridiculous amount of knowledge that he's blessed his own community with and ours over the years. Jim, it's good to see you here, buddy.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been a great weekend so far. Awesome presentations and conversations.
Yeah, it's got me at literally the edge of my seat here. Oh, where'd your picture go?
It's there.
Oh, there you are.
I'm back.
So Jim Donak, folks, for those of you who don't know you, is the coolest dude. Not only is he extremely well versed in anatomy, but he's like a circus dude. I mean, like catching people flying through the air on the flying trapeze. He's got shoulders like a brick shithouse.
Yeah.
So how did you get into circus stuff? I've never asked you that question. I only know that you're into it. I never know the path through it or to it or around it. Tell us a story, Jim.
Well, preceding that, I'll talk about how I got into anatomy first.
Cool.
It leads into it.
Okay.
So anatomy, I started to keep out of trouble in school because I was annoying people, too curious. So I put my desk in a corner. I started teaching myself anatomy. It was, I don't know, mid 60s. And I got interested in that. And then I got
Jim, you're 40 years old. What are you talking about?
Well, you double the years a few times, you know. I've had my 40th birthday many times. So then that got me into, I got into Chinese martial arts in my early teens. And with that, you stretch things and you strengthen things. And I was always comparing that to anatomy books. Grew up where there are lots of saunas. So many hours in a sauna with people, rubbing tight muscles and stretching them and doing hot yoga stuff and conditioning in saunas. So I was always into movement.
Mm.
And then I took a vacation in the Bahamas and I saw this trapeze with this big net under it. And I'm like, I'm definitely going to get on that. So I just sat around and waited to whoever looked like they were in charge show up.
Mm.
And then I said, I'm going to get on that. How do I get on that? And he said, come back at, I don't know, some other time. And I did. And we got to be friends. And that was a swinging trapeze. And then I ended up staying in the Bahamas, helping him teach just kids programs. He started business in the East United States, going to Florida, Tennessee, where we went to different communities and did enrichment programs. 100 kids, teaching them circus stuff and them putting on shows. And with that, there's only certain things you can teach people in 10 hours. So then you end up being the catcher on the flying trapeze, and you end up standing underneath people while you're on balancing boards and all that. Will I continue to like get interested in body work and anatomy and movement and things? And so it's all sort of to me a very similar connected thing.
How interesting. So it was a kind of an organic development. It wasn't just like you saw an ad in a newspaper for trapeze artists.
No, it was just like, I love moving. This is fun. This looks playful.
It sounds like a blast.
It's the bill. Yes.
How awesome. So it all kind of grew up together. Your anatomy curiosity, your bodywork curiosity, and your work with aerial movement arts and all of that.
All movement arts for sure.
So were there questions in particular from the aerial movement arts that were driving your anatomy studies, or was it?
Not so much specifically from people coming to me with questions, but my curiosity to have answers to things I saw that were sort of poorly explained or understood. So I'd done bodywork classes. I'd trained in orthopedic manual therapy. I've done the overall visceral work, and even the physical therapy sort of education has always been limiting in its paradigms. They don't talk about people that are hanging by their ankles or flying through the air. And I've had to sort of extrapolate. How do you take this knowledge about basically designed to get people to the workforce and to people that do extreme creative stuff with their body and in artistic ways? And so that's sort of fed the urge. And then when I see things that are sort of missing in common knowledge, it was like striving to fill those little voids or understanding of things for people.
And your body work, was that specifically devoted to the community of the circus arts, or are you an at-large body worker more?
I'm an at-large body worker. Sure, I get people of all.
Just everybody.
Surgery, post-surgery, high-level athletes, people that just want to, get out of pain, or just, I want to garden better, things like that.
And would you, what is your body work? Is there a particular modality? I mean, I know it's massage, but is there something that's favorite to you in the bodywork approach?
No, I pretty much have a strong amalgamation, because a lot of my approach comes either like from what's the behavior of histology, like what mechanical inputs go in to change things, and also cognitive behavior, like how do people perceive and conceive of the world around them to interface with it. And but if people say like, what are you doing with your hands? Because I've been in the lab many times, and I just sort of see how things are and how people move. And one person described it sort of as, oh, you do like blunt dissection on your clients, basically like making space, that kind of thing. And so if I have an official word, it's like, would you call that compartment release? I don't know. But a lot of it's movement as well as manual. It's I'll do manual stuff for many reasons, but I think like Jan was saying, it's mostly going to come down to, even if you do manual stuff, they have to move to it integrates. And I tell people, you become what you do, so do what you want to become. And that's a lot of it's based on that principle for sure.
So how do you explain your addiction to the lab?
How do I explain it? I
Yeah,
would
I
say
mean,
that
you have a serious drive. I mean, not everybody has, you know, in other words, I've been at it for a while. Not everybody has not everybody comes back. Not everybody, in other words, and then wants to teach. And so
Okay.
there's something very compelling there for you. And I'm curious for you to share that with folks.
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of nature. I grew up
Hmm.
northwestern Ontario, not a lot there, but moose and mosquitoes and lakes. And so I spent a lot of time in forests, and I'm marveled by the
Hmm.
diversity of topography and terrain and plants. And, you know, I can go a lot of places and see that, but there's only one place or a few places, I said, generally, that you can go to see that internally in that same miraculous expression of nature within somebody, within
Hmm.
a body, within a form. And I
Hmm.
think that's what keeps coming back, because it's never the same story. It's never
Right.
limited to what you're looking at. At least that's not my experience. You know, you can do dissection, you can see a body, but you see another representation of an aspect of the ecosystem that then can expand to the greater ecosystem at large. And so
Hmm.
it's just like you never see it all. You know, you can live in a near a national park and you do the trail once, you don't go back. I mean, right? Different seasons, different things,
Yeah.
everything. Yeah, and you see, I think you get a better aspect of the more you witness something in sequence, the more it can become more of a movie than a static image. So
Hmm.
I think that sort of effect happens as well.
Hmm.
You think,
Yeah. I mean, like in the progress of the dissection, the unfolding.
yeah, on all those levels of,
Yeah.
yeah, I just, you know, I can do a dissection. I can go to the tables and see miraculous work, and you get some information. And it's
Yeah.
sort of like, in a sense, equivalent to a snapshot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
come back again, and somebody does a similar dissection, and you move the person. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a different snapshot, and you add up all the
Yes. I know
snapshots.
exactly what you mean. I have that. Yeah.
There's all these metaphors for it. You know, it's like when they talk about the atomic level. You know, they used to think electrons were like orbits. Now they're fuzzy quantum where they're probabilities, and it's like it's a fuzzy probability in there. You may see it, you may not. It's like this. Sometimes it's not. Who knows what you're going to find when you look?
Yeah. I share with you that appreciation for the weirdly temporal aspect of repeating a process. And each time you come, it's like, oh, this scar in this person looks like this. And then you go to another body and you see it. It's like, oh, this is that scar I saw in that other body, but it's 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's a
Yeah.
year earlier. And the more you see, suddenly you've taken all those snapshots and put it together. And now there's this process that you've witnessed. And yet you've witnessed a process through the compilation of those experiences. Yeah, that's a fun
Right.
to think about.
Yeah, I think that to me can come out of the aspect of you get a better sense of potential,
Mm. Hmm.
right? Because this is what it is, but what could it be? What could it have been? And all those sort of
Yeah.
questions that we hold that are hard not to hold when you're in a lab.
So do you take it all into your being, into your practice in your mind, or have you been taking notes all these years? How do you hold it all together?
Um, I don't have a lot of notes I've taken. I certainly have books that I've looked through and read through and stuff like that. But I think I take it in more of this odd gestalt of anything could be anything anywhere at any time. So you just have to be open to it. And with a lot of experience of hours in the lab and working with people, these are like higher possibilities. It's like this, but who really knows? And we're all just making up ideas that help us communicate and get along with things. And so I don't have written notes a lot in a sense, but I hesitate in a sense to say it comes up as an intuition, but it's like I have a
Yeah,
large
no.
library of sample sizes that
Yeah,
my
exactly.
body can access.
Yeah, the best intuition is based on a lot of experience, right?
Yeah, and also working with people too. Like there's a lot of translating between what you can see on a form on a table Where what's that when you're working with somebody, and both how does it help me improve my ability to help them achieve their goals they're seeking me for, and also how can I extend that information to them so they have more autonomy with that as well. Yeah.
What do you mean by physical limitation eliminator? Can you tell us about that?
Elimination.
Physical limitation elimination. Yeah, I want the whole nugget
Okay.
unpacked.
Got it. It's a big nugget. I've taught at the San Francisco Circus Center for over a quarter century. And
Where?
at the
Say it
San
again?
Francisco Circus Center.
San Francisco Circus Center. Thank you.
For, I don't know, 7 years.
Uh-huh.
And I many times in a circus scenario, you take classes to learn moves so you can do an act, and that's sort of, you learn choreographies and stuff. My nature is I teach more body awareness and body understanding. So fundamental things that then you could apply to any other apparatus or class. And for many years, I taught a class called extreme stretching. That was about getting more range of motion. And I always can put together range of motion and strength. It's, to me, they're always connected. And so people would come to the class and realize it's not really a stretching class. If they really had a lot of mobility, they'd have to do strengthening exercises or stabilizing. And it wasn't representing it. So I asked people and students, well, what would you call it? They said, call it physical limitation elimination. So it's more of a methodology where I've got a lot of just ways of differentiating all the information I got from anatomy and the osteopathy and orthopedics, and finding elegant ways to finding out what a person's goal is, finding out in achieving these goals with multiple components, whether it's range of motion or strength or stability or dynamic movement, getting them to the threshold where I say they're on the verge of failure, but on the side of success, to help them progress these skills regardless of where they are. And I work with people that have nerve damage that are just trying to learn to walk again. I work with elite athletes. The protocols are kind of the same, but it's like you have a physical limit and you want to move beyond it. I'm really good about finding the right dosage and the structuring of an exercise or a way of thinking that can help you progress. And that's kind of what that is as a philosophy.
So when you teach your dissection classes, say,
yes,
is it with a view to helping people learn how to do that, or are you more interested? Is it more of a general just teaching anyone anatomy? What's your
my experience when I go to a lab? It's like the premise of what can often bring somebody in is they're going to learn anatomy. But I think as well as I do, what they really learn is how to see themselves in the world of life over time generally. So, and there's words I can give of anatomical names, but I'm more like a docet, just trying to get them to explore and give them suggestions of what they can learn. And again, in a similar way of like, if you're locked into this view, here's another way of seeing it, and how do I steer them to looking in novel ways and extending beyond what they may have as a fixed paradigm. So that's more my premise when I'm in there, but like marvel at the stuff, to the point where you realize you just would never able to understand it fully and all at the same time. And that's just the way it is, and find a way to be joyful and in love in that situation. And maybe you'll learn words of things, but you'll have an indelible experience that will carry you forth, even from an anatomical perspective of learning how to translate what you see in a book to what's real, in a sense. One of the things when I did a workshop last year, there was a woman dissecting around an ankle where the retinaculum was. Now, just noting the difference in tissue densities and fiber arrays, and then it was right where that big poster of the muscle man is on the wall. And they have retinacular drawn on. And I said, look, this is the thing you're cutting or dissecting. And her response was like, that's how they draw that? It just encapsulates so much of the experience.
That's nice. Yeah, like why? Why? Yeah, I've always said that after you take the class, it's not that all your books become worthless, but they become brand new, actually, because
Yeah.
all of a sudden you can see what the artist left out, how they interpreted, the
Very much.
actual tissue of the body. And it's like, oh, this is really a good book. It's not that it's worthless because it's not what I saw in the lab. No, it's just like now I can appreciate what that teacher who made that book was wanting to bring forward with respect to what I saw in the lab.
Yeah, exactly. It's like learning how to use your tools better and things that like I've been watching the people speak over the weekend, and a lot of it is sort of I'm like as I'm speaking, I'm like, how redundant am I going to be? Because people have said a lot of amazing things that I have strong sentiments and affiliations with thinking. And Lori was talking about seeing patterns in nature. It's like that's definitely true. That's a big part of it. Bonnie at Virgin was saying it's not like it looks like in the books. I took just some different notes I want to say. Leslie was talking about terminology, and that comes down to language stuff that I think a few other people mentioned. And even when I'm speaking with people, I taught anatomy at an energy school. So most people would only take it because they had to. They don't want to use words of things. And I try to impress upon them, not impose, but impress that one form of anatomy is learning the names of things. And the only people I know that really know a lot of names of things are the people that teach it. Everybody they forget it. And also, if that were the case, I go to somewhere in Egypt where they speak Arabic, or I go somewhere in Poland where they speak Polish. Does that mean I don't know anatomy anymore because I don't know the words? Like, how do you visualize it? How do you have it kinesthetically? And so I think that's a bigger value because language can be coming up in many ways, but even if it's English, so I was like, well, what do you mean by that word? What is, and people have a lot of ambiguity. And so I see a lot of discussions and talks that are like, you guys aren't even talking about the same thing, even though you're using a similar word. So I'm always wary about that idea of like, what do we call it? It's like, well, let's call it this. Ultimately, I think languages, we learn how to make a sound that somehow creates an impression in somebody's brain of something. And that's the fundamental aspect of it, I think. So I find that's kind of interesting. The visual stuff about relationships, a lot of what you get to at the integral anatomy is like, how do things relate? A lot of when I work with clients and people, it's like, what do we put the blame? Is it a hamstring? Is it an adductor? I'm like, oftentimes it's the fence. It's the fashion between it. And it's not like this neighbor's bad or that neighbor's bad. They're just having an issue with their fence kind of thing. And so it's the relationships of things that are often can be the problematic thing, not a thing or another. And just these different ways of thinking, I think, can come out in the lab. And that type of expansive thinking is what I try to get people to be more open to.
Yeah, nice. Jim, I remember years ago, you dove deep into a little mystery branch of the serratus anterior that is like one of these little, it's a great thing that you are looking at because I was fooled the first time I saw it. I thought I had discovered a new muscle. No one knows about this. And of course it was known, but it was not known to me. And so I enjoyed being surprised by it. And then you also took a deep interest in that with respect, I think, to shoulder action. And I think this just might be a fun little case study that we could share with the group about, things that can just turn you on and take you down a rabbit hole and turn into an opportunity for sharing, learning, different way of moving, how to support people, etc. Can you tell us a little about your curiosity there and where it led you and what you discovered?
Sure. And then if you have time,
you remember what I'm talking about, right?
I do know, and it's still a thing, but I wouldn't say I'm obsessed by it, but so what Gil's referencing is the first rib attachment, second rib attachment of the serratus anterior.
Yeah. So it comes over the top. You would never know it, but it comes over the top.
It's over the top. And what I found interesting is as I looked through all the anatomy books I could find, it was never really shown that particular, what I would call vector. Using when I'm talking, I don't usually talk about muscles, I talk about vectors. And it came up because I'd be working with people that have a tension, like the scapula almost raised, and I could slacken a levator. I could do all these muscles that in theory are lifting it, but it would still stay up. And I'm like, well, what is that muscle that's keeping that superior angle of the scapula just lifted? And looking as I might, I couldn't find anything. Figured it was, oh, this serratus anterior. And the views that you usually find that on are superior views looking at the brachial plexus. And so then, yeah, I asked you to do this. We've done dissections, and it's definitely morphologically significantly different. It's thicker. It connects to the levator and rhomboid and other fascia before it gets onto the scapula. So sharing common tendons almost of sorts.
Yeah.
And I find that it's relevant more for me in my practice because I do a lot with people with arms overhead. And a lot of serratus anterior is given this idea of upward rotation. But that serratus part is more of a downward rotator in a sense, depending where you put the pivot. So it's hard for people when they put their arms overhead, they often get this in tight, and it's hard for them to drop shoulders wide. And it's involved in a lot of these things that for a lot of my population, either doing aerial or handstands, was coming up as interesting. And so that's how I got into that project. And we did nice dissections on it, trying to find a view that I've never seen in the books. And I still do a pop quiz on people, and they maybe 1 out of 20 people guesses it's the anterior serratus. So it's fun.
That's a higher percentage than I would have expected. Because when you first see it, it's like, is that the anterior scalene? Is that the middle scalene? Because it's like, but I already took those away. It's a new muscle.
And also the ribs is all different. If you go from the deep aspect of it, you follow anteriorly to where it attaches the ribs. There's this big arc that comes way back. So it's very distinct, but I think really poorly, if ever, represented in any anatomy book. I only heard one reference where it talked about the lower fibers of the serratus having a behavior, and meaning it must be something different than the upper, but it's the only reference I've seen in 15 years of looking.
Yeah, when I did Anna and Zia, I was real careful in those. Let's see if I can do it with my hands. Not really. But serratus anterior, I gotta kind of does
goes backwards, yeah.
It kind of does that.
Yeah.
So you have these down fibers and then you have these up fibers, and these are the unknown ones. If you trace it all back together, it eventually gets together, but there's a big, like a fascial triangle in between the upper portion. I could do it myself, but to do it on camera is almost impossible. So this where my thumb is kind of a fascial seam or plane between the two sections. So the section that's hooking over your rib cage and the section that's flaring out and interdigitating with your external obliques. But I did cut it for Anna and Z as a single structure, because it is and to see it like kind of laid out flat on a table is a real it's kind of an aha. I'm like, oh, there's more to it. But I just had so much fun and enjoyed so much exploring that with you when we did, because I learned a lot myself, and it's really, that's the kind of thing, right, that you can take off and run with in the lab.
For sure. I was gonna say in the similar way with the way that I'm like, is this really the way it is? Like what's always sort of scrutinizing, just because it's been said before, is that you were saying like they take a picture, then this artist copies that picture, and it's like same thing when like often in the circus world with lineage, this teacher taught it this way, so that student teaches it like the teacher, but it's like that teacher taught it because you had that body type. This is what Joe was talking about, right? You have a new body type, but you're not always, as a student, not taught to teach, you're taught to do. So one thing I find interesting, and I'll just throw this out here because I think it's is thinking outside the box. Is I work with a lot of people that are inverted on their hands doing handstands. And even though I've never seen it spoken about really, there's a strong analogy between what people know as pelvic tilt when you're standing on your legs versus when you're on your hands. It's the exact same analog as I would call thoracic tilt, where people have their chest pointing down in a handstand because they don't have the mobility. And in a lot of this understanding of biomechanics and the anatomy, I looked at it's like, how do you invert things and make sense of how it all fits together? And you talk about breathing a lot. Leslie talked about breathing. There's an aspect of the pressurizations and the diaphragm. But when you first put somebody upside down, there's a lot of different mechanics that have to do with the pressure system and the weightlifting. And so breathing is something when maybe the limiting thing at first, when people go up and down, they don't know how to pressurize properly. And so that's things that to me goes all together in the practice of working with people. Right.
I imagine also, I mean, folks will go into, say, an inverted posture in yoga for a minute or something. But in your field, working with the people that you do, they spend more than a minute upside down. It's
yes,
right.
For sure.
It's, in other words, it's a whole. They're like, really pushing the limits of those pressure differentials, pushing the limits of those things. And those
that's one thing Jules was saying about, they go to doctors and they say they don't understand how these structures, you shouldn't do this. This is bad for you. I mean, if you ever want to see a contortionist get really down hardened is when the doctor says, oh no, you shouldn't be bending your back like that in the first place. It's like, this is my existence here. But I've worked with colleagues that grew up through the Chinese system of circus, and they fall asleep in a handstand. They get so bored, they're against the wall for like an hour.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, this is one thing I enjoy about the circus. That in itself conceptually has very little limits on what you put upon a human capability. And I just really think it exemplifies so much how limited a person can be if they choose to want to invest in something that's hopefully creative and playful and brings joy to their life, as opposed to a laborious task of arduous training.
So Jim, mentioning the contortionists, which I know is often a part of circus, and knowing that contortionists are often highly rewarded, hypermobile people who will at some point perhaps hit a wall with that and be in some trouble. Do you work with hypermobility on the repair side a bunch?
Yes. And again, this is that, like, what's the language meaning, right? Because I make a distinction between hypermobile and hyperlaxity.
Okay.
I think you could have elbows that bend significantly further back, recurving elbows, but they have integrity in the joint structure. The collagen's fine. It's just a skeletal thing.
Okay.
Right. There's some collagen variant that makes them not have stable collagen. Right. I think what Jan was saying, I find very true, is I find most people that have sort of reoccurring tight knots, trigger points, whatever you want to call them. The Chinese language of saying it, I'd say that's a deficiency condition. And not if I get people to move more, especially endurance movement, where it's long sustained stuff that has to develop, it grows capillary beds. Those knotty sort of tightening behaviors tend to go away, because I think it's a neurological muscular response to over demand, succeeding demands, so it locks down because it's energy efficient. So the endurance stuff, rather opposed to phasic stuff, I believe develops more of a capillary bed. Like saying, it cuts off oxygen supply. So I think that's a process. And to me, when I think of stability training, which is when people that are either hypermobile or relaxed have to develop more, then it's really working endurance stuff. With contortions, it comes up different ways. People that tend to be naturally bendy, they go like, oh, I could be a contortionist. And do start contortion training and realize 80% of it is strength and body control. It's not about more flexible.
Oh,
kind
interesting.
of stuff. And so that's the last bit. If you see a contortionist, you're wowed by how much they bend their body, but you don't realize they've been holding a one-arm handstand for 2 minutes,
Wow.
right? Because it's the bending thing that catch your eye, not that they're doing it in a one-arm handstand.
Right.
So it's a lot about training strength and control, and then I work with that, and it's usually in
Mm,
stability and endurance training for postural stuff
mm.
and end range control and that kind of stuff.
Oh, super interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's like a rare insight into that. I don't think I've ever, you're the only person I know in the whole planet who knows anything about that. So it's super cool to get those multiple phases of insight into what's going on there.
Mhm.
I appreciate you so much.
Likewise.
This has been fun. It's really nice to visit with you here in this way in support of the lab. I'm grateful that you took
What a
some
great
time out
lab.
for us
Yeah.
to talk with us and share. And I know you'll be back. Is this true? When are you coming back?
I don't have anything scheduled yet, but
Nothing on the
I
schedule,
back.
but you will be back.
I'll be
Good. And
back.
where can people find you and learn more from you, Jim? I know you teach at certain places. Do you teach also sort of what else? What else you got going on that folks can
I don't teach at the circus school in San Francisco anymore.
Okay.
My website is divingbuddha.com. One word, Buddha,
divingbuddha.com.
BUDDH.com. I do Zoom classes, Zoom movement classes.
Oh, cool.
Most of my in-person teaching is going to different schools and either doing teacher training or body education sort of stuff. And that's where you can get a hold of me. I do online
Cool.
sessions as well, which
Nice.
seems to work out pretty good. I'm good
Good.
at
So
working online with people.
divingbuddha.com. Now
Yes.
you have to tell us where that diving Buddha came from. What?
Okay. Diving.
You must share.
A lot of my first movement education was in the Chinese system through Qigong and Tai Chi and acupressure training and TCM sort of stuff. So I
Uh-huh.
grew up in the Great Lakes. I went home on a road trip. I came back and I gathered a bunch of these beautiful. Lake Superior has beaches with these beautiful agates. And I
Mm.
grabbed some birch bark and I found a little moose antler. And when I came home, I made a little fountain out of it. And then a new client of mine brought me some gifts because I've been thinking, what do I call my business? I didn't want to do healing hands this, I didn't want any of those words. And so he gave me a little statue.
Oh, nice.
And so I put him on a piece of driftwood on the top of a little waterfall. And I said, it looks like a little diving Buddha because I'm also a trampoline instructor and a flight instructor. Flight meaning how people fly through the air.
Yeah.
So that's where the name came from, and that's how it's stuck.
I love it. I love it because I've been, I don't know, 20 years looking at your email. Like diving Buddha, that's so sweet. I love diving Buddha. And now I actually got to witness the diving Buddha.
The diving Buddha.
That's great.
Movement through space and how the Chinese view of you're tending a garden is your health.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank the lab. It's great.
It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Folks, we're going to take a couple-minute break so I can maybe run and do some physical self-care. And maybe you'll do the same. I'll be back in a minute. And last but not least, drum roll, please. Jim Pulciani. Are you there, Jim? Did I come back too early from the break?
You're good.
Come on down. You're the next contestant.
Hello.
On the lab is right.
Holy heck. Wow.
This has been fun, huh?
Wow. Wow. I am
Jim's
blown away.
Are you-
I'm verklempt.
Are you verklempt?
I'm verklempt.
That's one of the dozens of things I love about you.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah.
What an amazing event. I mean, I'm so taken back by how this thing has went, how the speakers have been. I mean, gosh, what I want to take a second and just sort of, make a shout out to my team, which starts with Carla Oliva, who really was the brains behind putting together all of the online, figuring out the Zoom, getting all of this stuff sort of organized, and then training me on how to do some of this hosting stuff, which is, always a challenge. And really just, sort of, being that ultimate organizer for kind of creating that. I want to also recognize Kelly Robinson, who works behind the scenes tirelessly to be the rock behind this whole space that helps, keep us all here and keep me from losing my mind. And, boy, howdy, do I just want to, thank you, Gil, for, wow, what you bring to the lab, your energy, your following, your heart, all of yours. And what an amazing host have you been for us. I mean, gosh, I just watched you manage the worst thing that can happen, which is lose one of our speakers in the middle of the
middle of a sentence.
the middle of a sentence.
Not
And you
to
just
worry.
rolled with it. You took over. You did exactly what you needed to. You held the show, and it didn't. If people weren't paying attention, they wouldn't have even noticed that was a mistake. So cheers to all of you, and cheers to all of you people that have come here to listen to the event and support us, and to all the other speakers who graciously took part of their Memorial Weekend to come here and spend time with us and teach us some things. As every time I go to the lab or anytime I spend a minute with any of you people, my brain is swelling with information, and it'll take me a while to process it all.
Well, here's the thing, because Jim won't do it, which is to, I guess now it's my turn to extract from you, my friend, some conversation, insight, and learning. Jim is literally a bottomless well of knowledge. He's a doctor of Chinese medicine, practicing acupuncturist, servicing the veterans in our community tirelessly, while simultaneously juggling the executive directorship of our lab, helping us function. Oh, Jim, could you just pop out to Utah with a U-Haul and bring back everything we need? So, like, just come back soon.
Right.
So, the things that Jim has to pull off in the middle of the night or the middle of the day or the middle of a nap, to make the lab function are endless, and your commitment to it is just astonishing. And we're so in debt to you, because all of us who we've been listening to over the past 3 days now are all in your debt for keeping this space available, for doing the hard background work that makes it possible for us to do our thing. And we want to honor you in that, thank you in that, and support you in that, so that it keeps going, not only for our own selfish sakes and the love of our own careers and work, but also because you are also have your passion in teaching in the lab too. You teach your dissection workshops there, as well as host hundreds and hundreds of young people. And I would love for you to tell us about the development of that, where it came from, where it's been, where it's going, what are your hopes for that, and how that's going. What happens when you bring kids into the lab, and how do you hold the space for them, and all that stuff. I want to know everything.
So, gosh, I feel so blessed to be a part of this whole community, and so I again thank you for that. And this high school thing, what an amazing idea. The genesis of the idea really comes from Bonnie. Of course, the whole lab genesis comes from her, but she really wanted to, democratize anatomy, bring it down to the level so everybody can kind of learn from it. And so that was part of her original charter, was to make this, a high school program as part of the whole thing. And so when I came in, we had a couple of classes coming through, and it was a small kernel of an amazing idea. And over these last few years, we've been working on it, building it, and really developed it into what I really feel like it's the first of its kind. There are high school classes that can go to anatomy labs, but I don't know if there's a lab or a course that's specifically designed to focus on that clientele, that group of people, and really to create a message that specifically is for them. And so, wow. Whoa, when Bonnie first mentioned this, first thing she says to me, she's like, we're going to do this high school class. And I'm thinking to myself, high school kids, I don't know about, are they all right with this? And you kind of forget that as adults, we're the ones that freak out about everything.
Yeah.
They're the ones that actually can handle
stuff. They're fine. They don't even know that people die. They don't even believe in it. They see a dead body, they're like, it's good with me. They just roll with it, right?
That's so true. So true. And so, and then and then of course, my children were a little bit older. And so then you're not sure where the youth is at. And so those were thoughts that I had in my head. And then that first crew came in, and I think it was probably maybe 15 students. And they're scared. They're nervous, and they're excited. And oh my gosh, it was amazing. Just how it only takes a few minutes. We sit down with them at the very beginning. We don't just bring them right into the lab. There's a process here, and we get them in the classroom. We sit down and talk with them. We talk about what this whole thing is like. We do talk about life and death. We talk about bodies. We talk about, the expression of how your, every thought, every feeling, every movement is a body expression, and how your body is just the subconscious expression of your mind. And when we really sort of promote this sort of, understanding, and we're going to go look at a dead body, and we're going to learn from that, but we're going to learn from the life of that person. And we're going to learn about maybe their choices, and maybe, understand those choices a little bit. And so that's great. And so we really get the chance to really sort of relate to the students a little bit, and they're still nervous, they're still scared. And then we take them over to the body, and as soon as we open that up and we bring that sheet down, and they get to see it, you feel that sigh of, oh my gosh, there it is. And then you just feel the energy of their interest. And it only takes a few minutes of lecture before they start to really, gather around the table.
Crowd into the table, yeah.
Exactly. And, we give them in gloves and get them lab coats, and we want them to feel it and touch. And, oh gosh, I'll never forget, Carla and I were running a class, and we had a group in there, and we do a thing where when we have the chest cavity open and we can look at the heart and lungs, we actually inflate the lungs. And it really gives them a chance to see the lungs move, and feel the lungs move, really, and really understand what that is. I mean, life's breath. Wow. What a powerful moment to experience that on a 3-dimensional level. And so we had a group, we had a couple of students. We said, here, I want you to feel the heart, and then we're going to inflate the lungs around that. And I want you to feel that movement. And as that happened, the squeal that this student let out was this combination of joy, fear, excitement. Oh my gosh. I mean, it was so many levels of, and I just remember looking across the table at Carla and Carla looking at me, and we just locked eyes and we both were like, that's the moment, I mean, like, that's one of those things that, I mean, for us, it changed us. I mean, we'll never forget it, but I know she's not going to forget that.
That's a permanent impression. And when you're making permanent impressions, make sure they're good ones, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and to me, I kind of feel like, we talk about preventative healthcare, and most of the time when we're talking about preventative healthcare, we're still talking about people who have already made choices and whatnot, and they're trying to back off on those choices, right? And getting these kids at this stage, this is real preventative healthcare. I had a young man, I want to say about 2 years ago, after our class, 16, 17 years old, he's graduating that year. And he grabs me after the class. Everybody's kind of walking out, filtering out. And he says, Mr. Jim, he's like, I had a question for you. And I said, what do you got? And he's like, so I'm starting college next year. And I know about, the freshman 15, they call it, because we don't eat very well and we're just studying and not eating. And, and that's probably not good for my health. And I remember the intestines that we looked at on the table there, and I don't want my intestines to end up like hers. So what can I eat? What are the foods that I need to focus on? How do I need to prevent that from happening? And first of all, blown away, because here's a kid at his age who absolutely took this information in and took it to heart and really understood it. And second of all, for him to be making these choices at this stage where he's now really getting to start to make his own food choices, and before he even starts that, to have the impression that you get when you're standing three-dimensionally. You can learn this. I taught anatomy for 18 years. I taught physiology to both my patients and students, and preached diet and exercise and blah, 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 and all the things and all that stuff, and preached anatomy, for crying out loud. I thought I knew anatomy until I stepped into the lab and looked at it three-dimensionally and really realized what that was like. But what you really see when you really see it in all of its glory in a person that has really made those choices is something that you can't explain it, because it doesn't come in through just your eyes or your nose. It really comes in through your heart. I mean, you literally echo off of that, with your heart energy. You literally, you're taking it in tactily. You're taking it in on so many levels that it really does hit you. And I think, had I had some of these impressions at his age, maybe I might have been better at, making choices when I was younger about diet and whatnot. We didn't learn too much when we were young. And so to me, I see that as, hardcore, real, true to life preventative healthcare that comes, at this level.
That's a great way to frame it. I mean, that's like, so yes, that's so absolutely accurate. Very cool.
And the other
So there's
message
that, there's the preventative piece, right? And then I know you've told me, I just cut you off, so I just got to add this and see what.
You're fine.
It just occurred to me. I remember hearing from you also some stuff about like people's body image and how that affects young people, which is also like to have a voice with respect to body image issues in a culture where it's just pounded in from infancy practically, and how you can step into that stream of flow and alter the course. Can you talk about that a little bit too with the young?
Boy, howdy, at that age, I mean, holy heck, you are sure learning or trying to learn about your body and trying to understand it and trying to accept it. And you are I think at that stage, I think because our prefrontal cortex isn't quite so developed, right? All you have is your comparisons, and you're just comparing. And it really is a baseline note for us to hit as many times as we can, is this idea of how individually beautiful each one of our bodies are. And I love to speak to things about how, we'll take cadavers in who, maybe on the outside morphologically looked heavy and looked this or that. And we might have judgments about who they were and what their appearance is. And then when I get inside, I'm just blown away at how beautifully physically they are, because when you're big like that, you're strong too. You've got to carry that weight around. And that strength is beautiful. And so we can speak to that a little bit and talk about that. But even just at simple levels, I love this story. I think it was about last year. We were going through the body, and we were talking about the chest cavity and talking about actually the rib cage, and we looked at sternums. And the thing about sternums is they're kind of wonky sometimes. They're kind of different. Everybody has a little bit of a different shaped sternum, right? You got dented in sternums and pointy out sternums and so on and so forth. And so, right? Holy heck, And so we were talking about that, and actually it was a fun discussion because there was a kid in the class who was like, hey, I got a rib that kind of sticks out a little bit. And I was like, oh yeah. So we looked at that and we talked about it a little bit, and they had a little bit of a moment, and then we moved on and did the class. And afterwards, there was a little boy who was, again, standing there on the side, and he kind of waited till everybody kind of filtered out, and he came up to me and, Mr. Jim, I got a question for you. And again, what do you got? And he's like, so, earlier we talked about sternums, right? And I was like, yeah, I remember. Yeah, sternums. And he's like, so, I got one of them sternums that kind of dents in a little bit. And I'm like, and now, that's normal. That's okay. That's a normal sternum. And he's like, yeah, I feel that. But he said, I'm also worried that maybe I'm making it worse. Maybe I'm not helping it a little bit, And so we talked about that. And we talked about, maybe some postural things that he could do. And we talked about the fact that maybe he can't change it because that's how he's built, and that's okay. And we talked about what he can do to maybe prevent that from getting worse or becoming a problem for him in the future. And I felt like, again, as he walked away from me, there was a little bounce in his step. And I just, gosh, and I feel to myself, these are the moments where, as you know me, I'm not, I don't have a problem with crying. Being Italian and Sicilian, it's in my blood. But, he walks out the door and just, tears, because I know that, gosh, if he feels a little bit better about himself, if he's looking at himself in the mirror tomorrow morning and looks at his chest and just feels better about that, what is it going to do for him? How's it going to change life?
How's he going to talk differently to someone similar? Also, it's like, it's not just him.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And where will that, and as the youth, how will these kids, they're the ones shaping the future, we're just biding our time right now and enjoying the fact that we're still here, and, and they're the ones that are going to be running the show. And so to me, not only are days when I know I have a high school class coming in, one of my most exciting days, because I know I'm going to have so much fun with these kids. They are such a blast in the lab. At how many questions, and they teach me stuff. Holy heck. Sometimes they're the ones with the great ideas that I'm like, I didn't even think of that. Right. I love those days. But also just knowing that, we're really, this is the mission, is to, changing it at this base level and being a part of grassroots of change is, I feel so blessed, and it's why I get up and do this every day, and sometimes make those drives. And
so how
I'm in the middle of the night checking the cooler, making sure that it's working.
Beep, 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 beep. Oh no. so so where do they come from? Like, what do? You call up a biology teacher? Like, where how do they know to come to the lab? And do they come, does like the same group come more than once? Or is it more like this high school, then that high school, then that high school? What's the structure of it? I'm keen to share that, because this event is supporting this in some way. And I want to make sure people know about this, because who knows what it'll give an idea for someone in another state who might be near something else. And this can grow in other ways that we don't even know about from our conversation here.
I love that. And actually, I mean, this event really, I mean, culmination to get this thing going, to really help us move that forward, because what we really want to do is take it to more high schools, and that's our goal. And so we do our best as a skeleton crew to, you know, get the word out to the high schools. And what we've done it so far through the typical channels of word of mouth, communicating, talking to students. Whenever I talk to anybody who has a high school age child, I'm like, get me in touch with your science instructor. Let's get you guys in here, you know. And so it's been really from teacher to teacher, word to word, mouth to mouth, that we've got the program going. And then from there, you know, we've been in the last couple of years, you know, moving it to that next level of actually having a supporting website, and our goal is to really take this a good kernel of this money and use it as a launching pad for marketing to be able to get to more high schools, because I'd love to do at least every high school in our local area, and then beyond.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. Now we have that going, but you also do these in services that have been mentioned by Bob was talking about that on the first day, and how valuable that was to him as well, the in services. And is that a monthly thing?
We do it quarterly right now.
Quarterly. And what does it look like when folks come in? You have some teachers out.
What a great day that is too, as well. Those are great classes, because those are our true community outreach, in that they're designed to really connect with the local people around and give them an opportunity to come in and learn anatomy. And so it's a 3-hour session. Right now they're quarterly. They're getting busy enough that it looks like we're going to be adding multiple sessions, because they're full. And so we get people from the community, and what's great is we get practitioners, we get people who work in the field, but maybe in a different way. For example, we had a lady who was here, I want to say maybe a year or so ago, in one of our Saturday classes, who her primary occupation is as a taxidermist. And so it does a lot of the same kind of stuff that we do, but in a whole different way. And certainly not on humans. And so, but as a human with a body, you know, she's like, I want to know about this, and I want to see the differences, and I want to compare, and I want to connect with. And what an amazing addition she was to our class, because she again offered insights that you wouldn't necessarily get in a typical anatomy class, where everybody is there to study anatomy and they're all reading the same books and you know, learning from the same instructor. And so those community outreach classes can be quite fun in the variety of groupings that we give. We spend 3 hours. We have a prosected cadaver. We call this prosection, meaning that it's a body that has been prepared in a way, that has been dissected in a way that things are preserved so that they can see certain windows into our anatomy, meaning that we've dissected the shoulder in a way that they can see both muscles and nerves and things like that, or we've opened up the chest in a way that they can still see the structures there, but they're open so that they can see them move or touch them, or that kind of thing. So we take that same body. It's actually the same. It's the body that we use for our high school classes. And then sometimes on the Saturdays, we sometimes have some different events, because sometimes we have something coming up and maybe we have to do a little bit of extra work. And so we'll do some of that during that time, so they can actually observe dissection in process, which doesn't always happen, but can happen on a Saturday. Saturdays can be kind of a crapshoot a little bit in that. We try to make it a little bit more fun that way, so that it's not always the tour on a Saturday, but that it can be. So because we do have people that come on the regular to those classes. Bob is one of them. I have another friend of mine who's a Rolfer, Fred. Hi, Fred, if you're out there. And he's one of the lab rats, loves to come in, and anytime we have the lab open, he's there hanging out with us. And so he comes to them on the regular. And so you want to keep these classes fresh for them as well, and fresh for me. Again, you know, one of the reasons why I'm here is, you know, as a practitioner, like you said, I treat people during the week. I have a full patient load that I manage, and it's primarily a pain management. You know, I'm a body worker, was my original modality. I got that in 1991, a long time ago. And then in 97, got my traditional Chinese medicine license. And I usually combine the two when I'm treating. So good portion of my patients are mostly neck, back, shoulder pain, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, so all week long, you know, I'm looking at these bodies a whole and trying to figure out what's going on with them.
Mm.
And then on the weekends and then sometimes during the week, it's gonna be with you for a couple weeks here. I'm actually going through the bodies and then trying to discover that what did I see? How does this relate? How does this relate to this patient that I'm currently seeing? The cool thing is that oftentimes I really get that. I mean, oftentimes I'll have a patient that comes in with some complaints, and then I'll get a body that comes in, and I'm like, "Ooh, this looks very similar to what they're talking about." And then it really allows me some, you know, true insight. I say that with all the puns intended,
Yeah.
into the body, you know, to
Awesome.
see what's going on there, and that's fascinating, you know.
Jim,
Yeah.
you are a treasure. And we could have given each of our visitors what a list. I'm staring at this whole list on the side of my screen here. Triple the time. We wouldn't have even touched on what they bring to the table.
Right.
True for you as well. And we hit the mark, brother. It's 12:47.
Holy heck.
And
I can't see the clock because I don't have my glasses on. So
I know.
idea what
That's why
time
I had to be like,
thank you.
and yeah.
Exactly.
So folks, we are in deep appreciation of all of you for being here with us live today. And for all of you who are watching the recordings, I hope they've been as enriching for you as they have been for me and everyone else here in our audience. I'm amazed. I learned a lot. This was fun. I have like more questions than I started with. To me, that's a good sign of learning taking place. So thank you, Jim, for your heartfelt leadership. Thank you, Bonnie, for founding this. Thank you, Carla and Kelly. And I know I'm going to forget people who I want to thank who are making this happen.
Madhav.
Madhav
did our question and answering. Yay.
Thank you, Madhav, for being our guest and our friend and our fellow teacher and for handling the Q&A.
Thank you.
Let's wrap it up, buddy, with a big hug, massive. I'm going to hug my computer screen. Everybody gets a hug. We're hugging you.
I want to say thank you too.
Yay.
Carla here. Yay.
Yeah,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for helping us out with all this and setting this up. And this is a party. Although we can't see anybody in the audience, jazz hands. We did it, folks. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you in the ethers and at the lab.
Bye-bye.
Bye.